And we are back. Hello, everybody.
Hello. How are you doing?
I am Evie because here's the thing I got woken up too fucking early and I'm glad I went, but at the same time, I kind of want to die.
Yes.
It's fine. I just say EP bitch.
Psychos came with me to a thing that I had to do this morning, and we got up at like 7:30, and I'm used to it at this point because I've been doing it, but Psychos was not used to it, so that was definitely you were a very angry person this morning until we got coffee. Not angry, but you were on the verge of violence consistently.
I am not a morning person by any stretch of the imagination. Like,
And
I hate to say it.
think I am. And then
You are.
so here's the thing.
It's ridiculous.
I don't like being up in the morning. I hate being up in the morning. But if you get me up out of bed and into the shower, then I'm like, okay, I'm awake. Like, it's whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll pretty much be that way whenever you wake me up. It doesn't matter if it's 7 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, the moment that I get showered, I'm like, okay, I'm good and ready to go. I just accept that change of my state of being a little bit easier than
I don't.
Psychos does.
I don't. I am a ball of rage. You do like you wake me up too early. I am.
I almost got murdered this morning.
You did.
You were gonna tell the story of you killing me.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah.
Almost. This would have been a Psychos only episode today, boys. And then I would have had to go on the run.
Yeah, probably.
So, how was your day?
How
are you?
I was doing well. I don't want to say put into a bad mood, but I've just been seeing a lot of really sad stuff online right now, and it's just making me very sad. So now I'm in a sad spot right now. I don't know if I should mention it or not.
I mean, it's fairly recent. I feel like it's important to mention.
So,
especially with everything else going
yeah,
on.
so the very beginning of this month, I don't know the exact date. I don't know anything. I don't watch TV. But
Yeah, that's
there
fair.
is this spin-off, I think, series of Yellowstone, and there is an actor in it known as Cole Brings Plenty, and Cole was found murdered in the woods in Kansas. And today that we are recording this is April 8th, which is the day that everyone was kind of saying, like, braid your hair for Cole because the day before he went missing, someone had cut his hair, which I know very little about indigenous culture, but I do know that hair is very important. I have seen many videos from multiple different types of indigenous people all over the world who will cut their hair when there's a death, like the Maori people do that, I believe.
I think so.
Everyone was saying, if you have the hair to do it, braid your hair for Cole. And there is an ongoing investigation because they have not given a concrete cause of death yet. However, there are 2 girls online who were basically saying that he had it coming. And the day after he went missing, one of the girls reported a false domestic abuse charge against him, even though they weren't dating. And it's a lot. There's a lot. So I'm just kind of in a really, I've been thinking about it, a lot. And then I won't name where this happened because it's very close, but there was also a very recent murder that took place nearby where we live. We're literally 10 minutes away from us, that involved a very, very small child. So it's just been a little sad.
That one has been rough. That one's been that one has been on my head for a while. I don't know if I'm going to cover it right away just because of how fresh it is. I think the perpetrator just got arrested. They haven't done anything with the investigation as far as I know with it.
We know the cause of death.
You know the cause of death,
which is brutal. to say the least, and supposedly another very similar crime has been committed recently. I have no proof of that second one. It was mentioned on Nextdoor, which I always take Nextdoor with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and it's also just been
I
really gloomy. It was really rainy and cold today.
Yeah, my body's not thrilled by it, but
Yeah,
we're
so
doing what we can.
I was I was talking to my friend about this actually. I feel really dumb because, we do this podcast and we talk about really hard things, and I always get really emotional and I get attached to people. And I don't want people to listen and be like, "Oh, like why would you do a podcast about true crime and stuff if you're just going to cry about it all the time and be overly emotional about it?" And I listen to like a true crime podcast.
Yeah,
I listen to one.
I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. I listen to a lot of true crime videos. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I just feel like there's this level of like, now that we've started this podcast,
Mhm.
I find it hard to have like a real sense of humor when it comes to stuff like this. And I feel like there's a level of gravity that needs to be considered. And again, this is no hate to people who have a comedy true crime podcast.
Yeah, like
Um,
honestly, like cope how you need to. It's just harder for us now to
yeah,
do that
I'm
like that.
Yeah, me personally, I am very sensitive to the concept of death and decease, not in the sense that I'm like I get sorry, I can't breathe. And not in the sense that I get like really sad about it, but I just have a very specific sensitivity to how certain things as far as death go, where there's a level of like we don't know who could be listening.
Yeah.
And so I find it really hard to joke about things where we're talking about specific people who have uh passed away.
Mhm.
So that's just kind of where I am right now. Like I said, I listen to one true crime podcast, who is a true crime comedy paranormal podcast. And it's just I feel dumb for getting really sad and crying and being emotional about like stuff. And I didn't intend on being a big crybaby when I started this podcast, but
And then the second episode hit and then
I
you were
sobbed my eyes out.
yeah.
Um
And unfortunately
and
this
I don't cry
no, you
in
don't.
person like on a day-to-day basis. I'm not a big crier, but when I take these stories, I feel them very deeply.
You do. I cry and I carry them a lot with me when I'm doing my research, but when I try to present it, I try to take myself and my emotions out of it. There will be times, and you've heard, like, I'm pretty sure everybody has heard it in my voice where there are moments where I
You're really struggling to keep it
can't
in. Yeah.
do that, but I feel like it's almost disrespectful in a way to not talk about how these cases and these people have impacted us. Granted, this is just a podcast. This is just something that we're
And
doing.
we are only 14 episodes in, and
This
we are
is our
not
14th episode.
yeah, and we're not getting paid for this, and we
Nope.
put in over 40 hours between the two of us a week on this, on top of working full time, and I'm going to school.
Yeah, and I'm starting up another side career that I've been looking forward to a lot again.
Yeah.
So we're doing a lot in this, but to me I think it's worth it. That being said though, at
This
least
episode isn't too bad.
um I mean, in my opinion, it doesn't get bad again until, like, episode 16. That's whenever we start hitting, like, the heavy hitters again. I could be wrong, though. I'm
I'm
pretty
looking.
sure
I'm looking.
that's well, at least for me, I don't start hitting the hard stuff again until episode 16, and then I don't let up until I get
Mm.
another lighthearted
Mhm.
episode. Because I've realized that I can't do like, I can't do serious all the time. I have to do, like, some lighthearted, dumb criminal stuff. Like, it's not all life and
I
death.
think this episode and next episode are both not super serious.
Yeah. So this
And then
one, feel
after
free to
that
laugh at.
it's
It is bad for
downhill
a
from there,
while.
baby.
Yeah.
I
So,
also went and bought myself a Bible.
oh God.
Everyone will be happy to know. I have actually I have it right here. I have a Holy Bible King James Version
that I recommended.
by Holman, not God.
Not God.
It's a little tiny one. It's got a Celtic cross on the front of it. It was printed in Nashville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
It is. So I've been I want to say reading through this, but I really have just been like
Skimming.
skimming through it, and it's a wild ride.
It is.
It is very interesting. I'm just gonna be probably reading like a book at a time. They're books, right? These are sectioned into books. These.
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably read these a little bit at a time and give my little opinions on them.
Every now and then. Are we gonna start that this episode, or do you
No.
wanna...
I'm gonna do next. I'm gonna do that's just gonna be a separate series of me just reacting to the Bible.
Okay, got it. Guess what we're talking about, baby?
Every night in my dream,
I'm keeping that in.
I see you. I feel you.
We're talking about Titanic today, but not in the way that you might think. No. So
I don't want to be here for 5 hours.
I might
Neither do
eventually...
you.
Yeah, nobody wants to be here for 5 hours. I might eventually do a series. Anyway, so we're not talking about the...
You know that one meme of
Mm.
I can wait for you at the
The
bottom.
bottom.
But it's the Titan.
No. I'm gonna cover the Titan one day. I legitimately am gonna cover the Titan one day.
I will not.
Not right now. But
Someone was like, you should talk about the ghost of the Titanic. I was like, they're all underwater.
anyway, so
I thought it was funny.
we're not going to talk about the boat itself or the ship itself or like anything to do with the sinking as of right now.
Well, I kind of am.
You kind of are. But instead what we're going to cover is some fun stuff in relation. One day I will do like my own separate mini series on the Titanic, similar to what I have planned for like the Jonestown, but those things will be separate series in and of itself, and it's not going to be like in the main feed. It will probably be like bonus episodes that we insert every now and then. Like be like, here's this, especially on days where we just aren't able to get something up right away.
Yeah.
Cuz life is hectic and life is crazy.
It doobie doo.
It doobie doo.
It doobie doo.
So,
El doobie doo.
we didn't figure out how we were going to split this up. How do you want to do this? Because I have a feeling I'm going to be ranting a lot at you during yours, because I kind of know what you're doing.
I don't know, because usually we do the lighthearted stuff last, right?
Yeah, but
Like,
everything's kind of lighthearted here.
yeah, and also, so my section is more of the chaos variety.
I would not be so confident in that answer.
Okay, maybe we'll go with yours first.
Okay.
Yeah, because mine is just going to be a lot of me presenting facts and you being like, this is why you're wrong.
Yeah, pretty much.
Also, most of my information comes from one documentary that no one can seem to find the name of, so.
Yeah. So a lot of my sources are like a bunch of YouTube videos. I'll link them below. Not link them below, but like I'll link them in my notes once we finally get
Oh my
that
god,
up
I
and
don't
going.
even... Yeah.
It was also a lot of Vice articles too, because I watched the videos and they were like, oh yeah, according to these interviews, and then I went back and found the interviews just to make sure that was legit. So anyway, today I'm talking about the Titanic PCP poisoning.
What?
Yep.
The fuck is PCP?
I don't...
They poisoned the Titanic? That's why it sank. It was
No.
on drugs.
No. So I don't know what PCP stands for. I didn't want to look it up. It's a very hallucinogenic drug. It's also known as angel dust. And if you're online at all right now, yes, that character is named after the drug.
Phencyclidine.
Cool. Anyway, so it's a very hallucinogenic drug. It can overdoses are pretty common. You can unfortunately die from them, but thankfully nobody dies in this case.
Okay, cool.
And when I mean Titanic PCP poisoning, I don't mean like the actual Titanic, because that was over...
That would be wild.
That was over 100 years ago. I don't think PCP existed then. I could be wrong. I didn't look into it. but I don't think PCP existed in 1912.
That'd be fun though.
It would be. So instead I'm talking about the cast and crew Poisonings.
Of the movie?
1997 James Cameron movie.
That was filmed in 1997.
That was
I don't know why I thought you said 1979.
No, it was,
was like,
released in 1997.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. God.
So
Movie's older than I am.
same. So the movie itself goes through this dude. I forgot his name. I think his name is like Brock Lovett. And he goes and he's basically a treasure hunter, and he's looking for this thing called the Heart of the Ocean. Now,
It's the necklace, right?
it's the necklace. Now, supposedly this thing is like super like cursed.
Me.
But so he's like looking for it, and the last place that was like located was on the Titanic.
So he's looking for the Titanic.
Yeah. Why'd you say it like that?
It's either that or however the fuck I was saying it today. Titanic.
Titanic.
I was saying Titanic yesterday.
It was weird. Anyway,
I was still in character.
yeah. So he's like looking for this thing, and they find a safe, and in this safe there's like a bunch of like really weird money
And a drawing of a naked woman.
and a drawing of a naked woman. Now he decides to
true?
put this
Is that true?
the naked woman pit, like, was that like actual factual?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm.
The frame, like a lot of the storylines
Are you telling
not
the
true.
story of the Titanic movie?
I'm giving like a brief synopsis of the movie.
Oh,
just to give it like a
okay. I thought you
yeah.
were jumping right into the facts.
No. I'm
Never
just giving a
Yes.
brief
Okay. I'm here.
synopsis of the movie.
I am present now.
Okay, yeah. So he finds this drawing of this woman. So he decides to put it on the like put it on the news to try to like see if anybody knows who this is, and maybe
Mhm.
they can like come forward and help.
Her titties are out, by the way.
No, it's not just her titties, it's everything. She's
Tacos.
naked.
Her tacos out.
Really? Why'd you say it like that?
Titties and tacos.
Maybe I should sleep on the couch tonight.
Vagina.
Stop. God, you're like 12.
I'm like 5, yeah.
No. 5-year-olds wouldn't say something like this. 12-year-olds
13-year-old
would.
boys would.
Absolutely. Anyway, so they find that like this old woman and her granddaughter ends up like coming to the research vessel that they're on.
Yes.
And because she claims to be this woman, and a lot of people are like, I don't think so.
Who is this old granny?
Yeah, so like they go and then like they look over everything, and then she starts telling them about her voyage.
The story of the Titanic.
It's been 84 years. And then he like try to remember what you
The
can. And he's
sheets
like,
she gets been slept in.
Stop it.
Who steals a big fuck off bell?
I'm never gonna get through this.
Sorry.
No, like she's like, it's been 84 years. And the dude's like, yeah, try to remember what you can. And she immediately claps back and is like, do you want to hear the story or not?
Shut the fuck up.
I was getting into storytelling mode.
That woman had to have been 100 years old. She's
Yeah,
101.
She was 101. 101 next month.
Dalmatians.
No.
Anyway.
No, like literally in the movie that she's like like
I know, I remember that.
So anyway,
I've seen the Titanic movie.
I know, I'm just giving an overall thing. So like they flash back in time, and it tells about how she meets this dude named Jack Dawson, who's a third-class passenger who literally won his way onto the Titanic
in like poker.
Sorry, we had to eat food. Dinner was ready. I don't remember where I left off.
I don't remember.
So anyway, old Rose starts telling the story of whenever
the hottest hookup
of her
one
life.
night stand she's ever had. So intense, it sunk a whole ship. And that's the movie.
No. Anyway,
isn't that a line from Romancing the Pod?
I don't remember.
That's the movie.
And that's the movie, I think, is the whole like horror virgin and Romancing the Pod.
That
thing.
was unintentional, but
we're not either
Romancing
of those
the Pod.
podcasts.
If you're listening to
if you guys
I
haven't
love
done
you.
Titanic yet,
do
please.
it.
I would like
that feels like something they definitely should have watched at this point.
Probably. Anyway. So like sorry. My energy's a little off this episode.
Oh, he won his ticket
by
playing
yes, poker.
That's where we left off.
So Jack Dawson wins his ticket by playing poker.
Mr.
Dawson. So he like races on while everybody's like settling in, And Rose really doesn't want to fucking marry this dude because it's like a arranged marriage. Cal.
It's not
Cal.
Calcifer.
That's a different movie, man.
I don't remember his name.
Oh gosh, it's Cal Halbert.
That's a name.
I think. I haven't seen this movie in a while. Anyway, Cal. Abusive dickhead to the extreme.
Tell yourself. Cal Hockley?
Hockley. Anyway, so she's supposed to marry this dude, and she doesn't want to. And she's kind of over being like a rich girl. Because to be fair,
I'm tired of being a rich girl.
Oh my god, I wish I could be rich. But anyway, but to be fair, back then, being well off came with a lot of
rules,
a lot of high standards. So she decides that she wants to remove herself from her existence.
Me too.
And gets ready to throw herself off the back of the ship. Now, Jack Dawson's there, smoking, doing artsy things, because he's an artist. He's an artist.
He's artistic. Not autistic.
Like me. Anyway. So he finds her, talks her down, saves her whenever her dress inevitably like causes her to slip and almost die.
Drama.
And he saves her. He gets invited to din with everybody, and then she, after dinner and after like a whole lot of like passive aggressive shit being thrown at him,
they end up having sex in some random person's car.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
R.I.P. that guy. I mean, literally, but
I mean, but he ends up taking her downstairs to the 3rd class where they have like a real party, and she gets drunk, and then
you want to know what real peasantry is like?
Let me show ya. Anyway, so her and Cal have like breakfast together the next morning, and he ends up like being like, that's whenever you really see that he has like a lot of fucking issues. Like he like fully like flips the table in rage, smacks her. I think he hits her.
But like, he grabs her by the arms.
Yeah, he does. Like, I don't know if that's the case or not. Like, not that's the case. I don't know if that's the scene or not. He like reveals himself to be this abusive piece of shit. And at the same time, she's like, her mom is also like, you can't see this man, like, stop it. And that's whenever we find out that their family is like
hella broke,
super fucking broke. And that Cal, like, this marriage to Cal is gonna like help their debt. Are you good?
I'm just like, and also the boat sinks. And thousands of people die.
Anyway,
thousands? That was hundreds.
1,500 people die.
Thousands.
Okay.
Of people die.
I hated it. I loved it and hated it. Anyway, so moving on. So like everybody's yelling at her to like don't fuck with this dude anymore. So she like tells this dude to fuck off, and then you find out later
you're a weenie.
So then she goes and I love you, Jack. She finds him, and then like they have the whole like I'm flying, Jack, and that was supposedly.
And then she slips on her dress again, and then she falls off the front of the boat. No. She was the iceberg the whole time.
No.
Maybe the iceberg was the friends you made along the way.
Shut up. I love you. Anyway, so this is only gonna get wilder.
I'm really funny. You couldn't tell.
So anyway, so she sneaks him back to her stateroom. That's where
he draws her nudes,
naked. Wearing only the heart of the ocean.
I love ancient, vintage. I love antique nudes. I don't, but in concept, I think it's crazy. You know, the Titanic sank before the Romanovs were executed?
Yeah, put that on the timeline.
We should make a timeline.
We should make a timeline. And every time something like happens, we just add it into the
Just
timeline.
tack it on.
Anyway, so
Someone will make it eventually.
somebody will. It might honestly end up being me. We'll see.
Probably.
Gosh. Okay, so anyway, they like do the thing and then everybody's like, "Oh my god, Rose hasn't been seen like all fucking day. What are we gonna do?"
Where the fuck is she?
And like so Hal senses like valet bodyguard. I'm 100% sure this man was like a hitman at some point, like to chase them down. And so like they end up hiding out.
Yeah.
And that's when they have sex in the boat. Like sex in the car.
Some random dude's car. Which, like, how the fuck did they get into the cargo hold?
That's a question I wish I knew because theoretically that all that shit should have been locked.
But it's a movie and they have movie plot armor and skeleton keys.
and also
Tracks.
I just realized something in the beginning of the movie. Whenever like they flash back to the Titanic part of the movie, you see the car being loaded onto the Titanic, so it becomes like a Chekhov's car.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, what's that thing where like if you mention the gun, you have to use it?
By like Act 3, it's Chekhov's car. You see the car, it's gonna get used by Act 3 of the movie.
Isn't it Chekhov's cat?
It's Chekhov's gun. You're thinking of Schrodinger's cat.
Schrodinger's cat, thank you.
Yeah.
You'd think I know this, I'm a scientist.
You would think, but you know,
I'm stupid.
you're not that kind of scientist, baby.
I wanted to be.
You did, and then you
I
realized.
want to be a physicist so bad. I'm good at physics.
Are you sure?
I am, actually. I'm better.
You thought it was Chekhov's cat.
No, I'm tired. That's different, okay? I ended up being a anthropologist and biologist. I wanted to be a physicist. I wanted to do quantum mechanics, and I'm good at it. I promise.
Okay. Well, Mythos continues to weep about the past. Let's talk about the past. Anyway,
Not my past.
No.
Not my future.
if you were a quantum physicist, and
this
like,
would be a very different podcast.
we would not have this podcast.
Do you want me to explain the intricacies of velocity to you?
God, please
No.
don't. Put me out of my misery. Anyway, so
they have sex in some they consummate some random guy's car.
Yeah, they fuck in the car and
Broke it in.
Nope.
Broke it out.
So they go out onto the deck and then they see like and then like the lookouts are like looking down and they see these two canoodling and they're like, I wish we could do that, and then like one of them pushes them away like, ew, no, I'm not gay. They should have been in the movie anyway.
And then they look up and they spot an iceberg and then they start panicking and then you remember, oh yeah, I'm watching a movie about the Titanic.
Yeah.
75% of the way into the fucking movie.
And that's when you remember, oh shit.
You're like, oh my god, this is such an amazing
like love story.
between these two bitches. Oh no, there's an iceberg.
Like,
oh no, it's John Wick.
Anyway. So iceberg collides and like
as they are known to do.
So like Rose is like, oh shit, this is pretty serious. I should probably tell my family because she's still a family girl. Like, kudos to her. I'm not
a family girl.
So she goes and she runs off to tell her family, but then like I'm totally convinced this dude was a hitman. Hitman dude. He like slides the heart of the ocean into Jack's pocket to frame him
for murder.
Not for murder,
Oh.
for thieving and pinching. Anyway, so so he gets like arrested and like taken down, and she's like, the ship is sinking, we really gotta like do something about this. And everybody's like, no, it's fine. And then
the ship's not gonna sink.
It's
unsinkable. That guy who played the lawyer teacher from Legally Blonde said so.
No,
he's the same actor.
I know, but I'm so angry that you know him as that and not as Thomas Andrews. Because every time I see this man in anything, I'm like, oh shit, it's Thomas Andrews. And you're like, oh my god, it's the professor from Legally Blonde.
That's the guy who hit on her.
And I'm like, so
screw you for what you did to Elwood. And he's like, I designed the Titanic. What are you talking about?
Yeah, like two completely different things. Anyway,
both men were responsible for the downfall of two bad bitches.
No, he was not responsible. So she ends up finding where he is, and goes to save him, and then they like break out, and like everybody's like now fucking clamoring for a fucking iceberg because everybody like the ship is like genuinely sinking at this
You
point.
said clamoring for an iceberg.
I meant clamoring for a lifeboat. Same difference. According to Wreck of the Titans, some dude climbed on to the iceberg.
Yeah, why don't you just climb on the iceberg? It's probably warmer than the water.
Because it was gone by that point.
It sank?
No, like they kept going.
Oh, the ship. Oh,
The ship kept going for a little bit and then stopped.
Oh.
And then like the iceberg probably like ricocheted off the Titanic somewhere.
Like an icy bullet.
Oh my god. Anyway, so they finally get her and her mom and like people into a boat.
It's some kid's baby, some person's baby.
No, it wasn't. It's not that part. So like everybody's just like, because like they fool her into thinking like, oh, there's a boat for both Hal and is it Cal or Hal? Cal. For
Don't
both
ever
Cal.
say the name Hal to me again.
Sorry. So they both are in. So that like they fool her into thinking there's a lifeboat for both Cal and Jack, but it's reality just for Cal, and that Jack is gonna die.
And an epic brawl ensues, and Jack goes Super Saiyan and punches Cal off of the ship, and he ricochets and like hits his legs on the lower deck and like does an epic like triple flip into a different lifeboat, and then gets the shit beat out of him in that lifeboat.
No. I love you, and I love your revisionist history. It's just not happening. Anyway, this is why.
This is why you can't watch movies with me.
No.
I think we should have a version that's it's like Titanic parentheses Mythos' version.
For real though. Anyway, so they're
James Cameron, are you listening?
oh my god. Hi. Just a big
Hi.
fan. Anyway.
I'm so glad you weren't on the Titan.
Oh my god.
Cut that out, cut that out.
Leave that in, leave that in, leave that in. Anyway.
Editor, cut it out.
Me, no. Me, the editor, no.
Oh, this is the most unserious.
So I haven't even started my actual notes
We're
yet.
40 minutes into recording.
I haven't even started my actual notes yet. Anyway.
So Cal does a backflip off the boat.
No. So Rose realizes, oh shit, you jump, I jump. I'm staying with you to the very end. So she jumps back onto the fucking sinking ship.
Which she could have just pulled him into the.
No, because by that point she was too far away.
He could have jumped.
Yeah, but he wasn't.
He could have done a backflip.
He could have done a backflip. It wasn't going to happen though. So she climbs back on. They stay together. The boat sinks.
You know, the boring stuff.
The usual. Some dude does end up falling off the
and
back
he
of the
hits the
ship
propeller!
and that scarred me. That scarred 7-year-old me for life.
I
by
probably
the way.
scarred him too.
That was so fucked up.
That was great.
I think he was dead before he hit the water.
Probably not.
I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, going
See?
back. So
Hey,
like,
dude.
so then it flashes back to the future, and everybody's fucking crying because everybody's just fucking
Oh,
dying.
it's so sad. And then Grandma goes senile.
No,
and murders everyone on the boat.
Shut up! No. So, she later reveals that she changed her name to Rose Dawson, which is why Rose DeWippicator is listed as dead because she changed, like, she gave the wrong name.
Rose Woodchucker. What did you say?
DeWippicator. That's her name.
DeWippicator.
DeWitt Bucator.
Okay, you were saying it way too fast.
God, your reaction was almost exactly like Jack's from the movie. He's like, I'm gonna need you to write that one down.
I need a pronunciation guide, please. Thank you.
Anyway, so
Jack Dawson sinks into the water. And
no, we're
then
not
he
there.
Wakes up on the shore, and we're in Inception.
Fuck. So anyway, ship goes down. They're in the water. I've completely breezed over this part. She gets on a door, and he can't.
That door recently sold.
I know.
I'm stupid
so
amount of money.
upset that we didn't get it.
Where the fuck would we put a big fuck off door?
I'll find a place.
We gotta stop quoting Internet Historian.
We really do.
If you haven't watched the Costa Concordia episode, though, of Internet Historian, it is the funniest goddamn thing. We watch it sometimes just for funsies. We've seen it at least 8 times.
More than that.
It's an amazing episode. It's so funny. Every single time you watch it in the slow-mo scene when the ship finally hits the rock, if you watch it, you'll discover new items flying in the background. It's hilarious.
It's my favorite.
They were playing My Heart Will Go On
I know.
as the boat was sinking.
And everybody was just like, ugh. That's not helping at all. But so he ends up dying of hyperthermia in the water, and she's like, I'll never let go. And then she lets go of him because let's be honest here, she wasn't talking literally. She was
I'm gonna drag this body with me back to America if it fucking kills me. And they're like, he's a corpse. And it's like, he's my corpse.
That's terrifying. If you don't do that to me when I die, I'm gonna be very upset.
Knowing us, whatever takes you out is gonna take me out too.
That's fair. Anyway, so she like gets on the Carpathia, and she gets her name as Rose Dawson, which is why Rose the Whipplicator technically died that night. And then she ends up marrying somebody else, and Cal ends up killing himself during the Great Depression, because when the stock market crashed in 1929, that's when he killed himself.
So my grandfather was born.
Nice.
He was a depression baby.
Me too.
So am I.
Anyway, so the movie ends with old lady either
going senile.
No.
And she goes over to the railing, and there's two different versions of this scene. Either the one that I've seen is she walks over to the railing and she looks at the necklace and she gets this disgusting grin on her face, and she like goes over to the railing and she's like, and she's holding it in her hand and she just drops in the water. She goes and like drops it in and it just sinks. Or the second version, which is super dramatic, where she's holding the necklace out over the railing, and the fucking, I don't know, beach blonde dude that's like running this whole shit, he runs out and he's like, Rose, don't do it, and she's like, oh, and she like kind of drops the chain a little bit, and he's like, huh! And then, and he's like, don't do it, Rose, don't do it, and then she just drops it like a bad bitch, and then she dies.
No, okay,
that's not a lie. And then she dies.
That second one
That's true. That's
she
true.
She does die in the movie, but that second
one was a different take of that scene.
The second one was not a different take of that scene. That second one was a direct ripoff of fucking Pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay, but it was still filmed for the Titanic
No,
movie.
it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it wasn't.
Anyway, she fucking... Are you saying I ripped it off?
No, I'm saying... Okay, anyway. That was not a scene.
And then she dies.
That was not...
And then
that was not a scene.
And then she lays down in her bed on the ship that she made people bring so much fucking luggage to. She lays down in her little bed and she goes... Ah, and she dies. And then she wakes up in the afterlife on the fucking Titanic. None of her family is... like, none of her, like, family that matters. Her husband, fuck him. Freaking Dawson over here is standing there at the top of the fucking stairs, and he's like, I've been waiting for you. These fucking people. They can't with these people. And then when the Titans sink, people can post like memes about when they go to sleep and they wake up and they're in the atrium of the Titanic. And they're surrounded by all these people.
Okay, to be clear, the one where like
she dies on top of where the Titanic like is chilling, and
she wakes up in the afterlife, and she's reunited with Jack,
and she's now on the Titanic.
Yeah,
like down there.
It's fine.
It's dark.
Anyway, that one scene that you were talking about where she's like taunting the dude. That was never a thing.
That was never filmed?
That was never a thing.
Did I make that up?
You made that up. You made that up. Because I think what you were thinking about was that scene from...
No, that's the thing. I promise.
I don't believe you. Oh my god. I really don't believe you.
You want a fucking bet? Do you want a fucking bet?
Send it.
I don't even need to send it.
Okay, to be fair, my hyperfixation was never with the movie. It was with the actual Titanic. I mean...
I can't believe you've never seen that.
How
did I know that and you didn't?
To be fair, my hyperfixation with the Titanic was never the movie. The movie kind of kickstarted my hyperfixation with the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
But my hyperfixation was more on the actual Titanic.
I can't believe
than
you've
the
never
movie.
known that, and I knew that. Yeah, I didn't make that. Okay, maybe I dramatized a little bit. Her
Yeah, that's
like,
fair.
like kind of dropping it, but she fully fucking in front of them yeets this necklace into the ocean.
Okay, that's fair.
Why did you test me?
Because
It showed up on TikTok, is what it is. It showed up on TikTok forever
Oh,
ago, and I was like,
okay.
"That's such a batter bitch ending." And then it's like everyone learned the lesson of like, oh, it wasn't worth it because it was just a stupid necklace, and he like is like, oh, I'm such a better human now because of it. And it's such a more bad bitch version than just being like, oh, I'm just gonna drop it in the ocean. No one ever knew I did it, and then I'm gonna fucking die, and they have to deal with my body.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I didn't think that was a thing. I have been proven wrong. Cool.
I accept your
Nice.
apology. Apologize for calling me crazy and saying I made it up.
I'm sorry for calling you crazy and saying you made it up.
Emil said you're welcome. Thank you.
You're
And
welcome. No, because to be fair, the
I
movie.
can't believe you doubted me.
Yeah, again, to be fair, my hyperfixation was never with the movie itself. I do enjoy the movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, but
I don't.
it's not. But it's not the Titanic to me. Like it's the Titanic
I mean, it's
itself is
literally the
more.
Titanic, but it's not the Titanic.
Okay. Anyway, so with that fun, festive rendition out of the way, it's time to get into it. While filming one of the greatest movies of all time, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
I had to like clarify that.
Mm-hmm.
Many cast and crew were actually subjected to many illnesses and injuries like broken bones, colds, near drownings, and even a ruptured spleen.
Cold.
Like cold. Like I think Kate Winslet actually had gotten like caught pneumonia while filming.
Well, yeah, because they had them film in like the actual like temperature water, right?
I don't think she would just refuse to wear a wetsuit because they filmed in Mexico.
Oh, I thought they filmed in waters that were actually that cold. Is it a myth?
I think some of the water scenes they actually did film in that thing. Again, the movie magic part of it, not part of my hyperfixation.
Fair enough.
If it was not on the actual Titanic, my brain,
I don't know anything.
not here.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Anyway, so, but none of these held quite like the intrigue of the night of August the 8th, 1996.
Ooh, dun dun dun.
Now, filming on the modern day portions of the movie in Nova Scotia was nearly done, and the crew was getting ready to make the move to Mexico to film.
Wetty.
What did you say?
You said getting wetty, not getting ready.
Getting ready to make the move to Mexico to film the historical portions of the movie. And since a majority of the filming took place at night, they ended up getting catering to the set because they essentially became nocturnal.
Yeah.
So like most restaurants weren't open, except for one that the old lady actress who played Old Rose. She went to a restaurant during this. Like
I love that for her.
Like she was like, I'm too tired for this. I'm glad she did because I don't know how what's about to happen would have impacted her.
Oh yeah, being so old.
Yeah, she was like 80 something.
Mood. She was a starlet.
Yeah, she was. She's so pretty. Anyway, so they ended up getting like catering to the set, and it was really expensive, nice catering. But the budget was like $200 million, so it was really expensive. They could afford the fucking catering. So they provided like a number of dishes, one of which was a seafood chowder.
Ooh!
Some thought it was shrimp, others thought it was clam, but nobody could really agree. The general consensus was that it was just seafood based, possibly shellfish. There was some sort of shellfish going on there. Now, about 80 people, Bill Paxton, the dude who played the scientist dude in the beginning, the treasure hunter dude, who's also in Twister.
Yes, that's where I know him from. I was like, where do I know him from? He's in Twister.
Yeah. So Bill Paxton and James Cameron included all took 80 people total. All got a bowl of chowder.
Ew.
And everybody said it was really, really good. And
that's
some
your
people
first mistake is eating fucking chowder.
Yeah. And some people even went back for seconds. Now, the effects didn't take long to set in. Starting with dizziness and lightheadedness. Some people, like James Cameron and Bill Paxton, run to the bathroom to throw up, thinking it could be something called paralytic shellfish neurotoxin, which, by the way, new fear unlocked for me.
That's why I don't eat shellfish, really.
I mean, you do eat shrimp every now and then, but...
Yeah, but not that often. Maybe like twice a year.
Yeah. So whenever they came back from like making themselves throw up because they were like, ugh, trying not to die, they found that everybody was kind of sorting themselves into two groups. Like it was like a shit show.
People who weren't fucked up and people who were fucked up.
Pretty much, yeah. Those who felt fine and those who were giggling hysterically, crying, or experiencing extreme anxiety or existential dread,
Wait,
or
me.
cycling through all of these with some degree of regularity.
Me too.
Slowly, the group of those who were feeling all of that grew to about 80.
Oh, so it just took longer for people to feel it.
Yeah, like people who started like feeling the effects sooner, like automatically went over to that side, but then the more people started
Yeah, it started
filtering
to,
in.
yeah.
Bill Paxton later said, quote, "Some people are laughing, some are crying, some are throwing up. One minute I felt okay, the next minute I felt so goddamn anxious I wanted to breathe in a paper bag." End quote. Another crew member, Marilyn McAvoy, who did like set design, like she helped to paint the sets and stuff. Like she's really cool. She said, quote, "It was kind of like a combination of being high on marijuana and being drunk. I was functioning, I was reading magazines, it was like a dream." End quote. So by now it's very, very clear that they cannot stay here. They all needed to go to the hospital. So this local ER in Nova Scotia is now flooded with 80 drugged up people. It's a fucking nightmare. It's a shit show.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They try to separate everyone to try to maintain some level of control while they ran tests to figure out what was going on. And that didn't work. James Cameron ended up getting stabbed in the face with a pencil by a crew member.
Mood.
And like this entire time he's like giggling and like he's fucking out of it. A conga line ended up being formed. Some people were taking wheelchairs and like sliding them across the fucking
Me.
thing. Like it was a nightmare.
Amazing.
So people started stumbling all over themselves and like tripping the doctors and the nurses and like running into them. And everybody was just like, you know what? Fuck it. In an effort to try to stop whatever the fuck was going on,
Sedate them.
they recommended everybody drink activated charcoal.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah. Because they weren't sure what it was. And if you tried to sedate them without knowing what's going on,
Oh, it could make it worse.
it could make it worse. Anyway, so what activated charcoal does is once it hits your system, it completely stops everything. Like medications no longer work. It acts as like a emergency stop button, emergency exit button.
That's why when that black Starbucks drink came out like a couple years ago, everyone was like, "Do not take this if you're like on birth control or on medication. Like,
Yeah.
don't drink this because most foods that are like non-dyed edible, you're usually dyed with activated charcoal.
Yeah, activated charcoal will stop everything. If you're on medication, don't do it.
Which is not the same as grilling coal
It is not.
or like fire coal,
or
like
drawing coal.
Yeah, or drawing coal. Any kind of coal. It's a very specific type of coal. Please do not just start eating fucking art supplies. Okay,
Please don't.
Please don't.
So they recommended like everybody drink this like water mixed with activated charcoal. Bill Paxton was like, absolutely not. I don't care. So he went back to the set and he ended up drinking an entire crate of beer to figure out what the fuck was to like stop whatever was going on.
I don't know how that was gonna help.
I mean, it worked.
It worked?
Allegedly, this actually worked.
Well, probably because he threw up all of the thing that was in his system.
Probably. But both the charcoal and the crate of beer worked, and the next day everybody was released with minimal injuries, heading back to filming the very next day.
Except for fucking James Cameron with a pencil in his face.
No, he went back to filming too.
Amazing.
So everybody was just like,
I'm happy for him.
Dude, the hangover though?
Yeah, I imagine.
God. So we do know that there was PCP in everybody's system, which is how we know that it was PCP and not some other drug or food related thing.
Now,
we get into the culprit theories. Suspect number 1, a former crew member who had been fired the day before for messing with the catering company. Apparently, this crew member had been like antagonizing the catering company, and James Cameron said, "You're out."
Yeah, I actually immediately think it's that person.
Yeah. But the theories for why he did this was
because he's salty.
Yeah, basically salty from getting like he wanted to get back at James Cameron to trying to get the catering company fired with him. I mean, it worked. Like the catering company was fired, but because there was a level of food safety that they have to maintain and they did not do that for whatever like
outside of the PCP issue.
No, just the PCP issue is what caused them to get fired.
Yeah. Well, okay. So how did it end up in their food?
We don't know. Nobody knows.
Oh, but obviously it wasn't safe enough that someone couldn't tamper with it like that.
Yeah. It was, since it was so tamperable, everybody went, okay, unfortunately, you guys made really good food, but we gotta let you go. The company later stated that, like, the catering company later said it was the Hollywood types who brought in the drugs. So they deny everything to
Oh,
do
they
with it.
basically said, "We didn't drug you. You drugged yourselves."
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Suspect number 2 is the chef who prepared the food. We don't know
Ooh,
why. We think we
just for
actually
shits and
just
giggles?
for shits and giggles. This is where the catering company stepped in and was like, actually no.
That would be a really it wouldn't make sense if the catering company did that because I feel like if you're like, "Oh, we're gonna poison the food of this movie set," like, your name would be out there. Like, it
Yeah.
would be a really bad mark on you if someone in your so, the company probably didn't do it intentionally, and also, like, no one would wanna eat food made by the chef who poisoned the Titanic crew.
Yeah. So, suspect number 3, rival studio.
Oh!
But here's the thing though,
Uh-huh.
Titanic was projected to flop. They
Oh!
did not nobody thought that this movie was gonna do well, like, at all.
And it's like a classic
It's
now.
a it, like, it after Avatar came out.
This man can't
Oh,
stop making bangers,
no,
can he?
before Avatar came out, this
It
was
was, like, the
the
movie.
highest grossing film ever made.
Yeah. I like
So,
Avatar a lot, by the way. That's probably a controversial opinion. I just really like the movie. I understand it's a ripoff of, like, older stories, but I just think it looks really cool.
I mean,
I
yeah,
like that there's a second language. Way of Water was amazing. I cried my eyes out in the movie theater. I'll do it again.
same. But, like, that one's been kind of disproven because this movie was projected to flop. There's no reason why anybody would be like, "Oh, we gotta sabotage this one." Like, cause the budget was massive for it, yes, but just because a budget is big doesn't mean the movie's gonna do well.
Yeah. You ever seen an M. Night Shyamalan movie?
Oof. Hey, now. The first one he ever did, Sixth Sense, was really good.
Never seen Sixth Sense. I've seen Lady in the Water,
Yeah.
which wasn't it wasn't a bad movie. The storyline I did appreciate. I think it was executed really poorly.
Yeah.
But the concept of the movie, I actually really did
That's
appreciate.
usually how it goes with M. Night Shyamalan movies. I think he
M.
has
Night Shyamalan? Is it Shyamalan?
Shyamalan?
M. Night
Shyamalan?
Shyamalan?
Shyamalan? I don't know.
Shyamalan?
Anyway, the problem with his movies though, he has really good concepts, and I'm like, I love his concepts.
Isn't his daughter making a movie right now?
Yeah, his daughter is. I think it's getting released soon. But he has really good concepts, but executing them,
He's not the greatest at.
he's not good with it.
No.
He needs to find like a better people to work with because his concepts are really good.
I think he just needs to let other people run how the movie is filmed, and he
Yeah.
just needs to stick to the ideas, you know.
Like writing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so suspect number 4 was
Don't get so involved.
Susie Amos, which was James Cameron's wife.
Drama.
She's the one who plays Rose's granddaughter.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So the reasoning behind this,
Mm-hmm.
she didn't eat any of the chowder that night.
Maybe she just doesn't like chowder. If you brought chowder to work, I wouldn't fucking eat it.
I know.
You're like, yeah, Mythos, you don't like chowder.
Duh. Anyway, so that one was like, whenever like it was like in an interview when I like asked like, so who do you think did it? And he's like, actually, my wife.
I think my wife did it. That sounds like a joke answer.
It was a joke answer.
Yeah.
So we're done with that. To this day, nobody knows who it is. I think it was the former crew member. I think it was the crew member who got fired.
100%. It could have also been.
But at the same time, how did he get back on set to poison something that was served that day, not the day before?
Here's the thing. I've been on movie sets, and I've been on movie sets for really not low budget movies, but movies that like were decently whatever. It's not that hard actually to wander onto a set.
Okay.
It really isn't. And it's a little concerning sometimes, but like it's not that hard to just like, did you do like film school or anything like that, or like filming a student project or video, or even probably like the journalism class or whatever? So like imagine you're like filming something with your friends and there's just like a bunch of you and like no one's keeping track of where anyone is and whatever. Like I've been on a few movie sets and stuff like that. It really is just like, or did you do like stage productions?
Yeah, I did theater a lot.
So you can imagine if you're in theater, there, you got your tech crew, whatever, but, like, it's
Mhm.
kinda like someone could just wander backstage and you don't know who they are, you don't know if they're part of the crew, you don't know if they're part of the whatever. People are bringing, like, their partners back, people might be getting food delivered,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
someone's
that's
mom has
fair.
popped in.
Yeah, that's true.
It's genuinely, it's the exact same thing. Like, I know some people think that movies are, like, this crazy high production
That's what I thought. Okay, so there it's
whatever.
not.
No,
Okay.
literally, you'll have a couple of tables set up that have, like, like, on set, you'll have a couple tables set up where, or, like, camera set up where the director and whatever, like, have cinematography, they're watching the everything go on, and then you'll have the cinematographer, so the guy
Mhm.
who is strapped into the camera, literally strapped into the camera.
Mhm.
You'll have him or her,
And them.
them. You'll have the cinematographer, and you'll have, usually a team of, like, I don't wanna call them stagehands, but they're basically people who are there to, move shit around, direct people to where to go, but also to say, like, the cinematographer needs to get a certain shot, but he's not high enough. They will impromptu, in 30 seconds, build a ramp for him to
Okay.
go up. Like,
That's fair.
they'll put a step stool up, they'll get a stage going, like, it really is just, like, people are moving and shuffling around, and you can have, like, 40 people in one room to fill up a room, and you don't know who these people are,
Mhm.
and also, like, you can't tell unless, like, usually they're wearing shirts or something that have them identified, but if someone was fired from the crew, they still have their crew shirts on because it's not a mandated thing you have to wear at work. I've met people who are wearing, was it the Doctor Sleep? That, like, Shining spinoff movie?
Oh, the sequel, yeah.
Yeah, I had people who were crew come, like, I've met them, like, out on the street, and they're wearing their crew shirts, so they keep those.
Hmm.
Um, so it's, and maybe this is just because of the certain movies and films, things that I've done, but, like, you have your team of people, but, like, makeup artists, I did makeup artists for a couple things. You literally do just kinda wander on set, and if no one bothers you, you're just there. It's not that hard to just
Okay.
walk onto a set. I
Okay.
know people think it sounds, like, really weird, but you'll have so many people moving in and out, people sending in messages coming out of that, makeup artists, catering, the whole set design team. Like, you have so many people moving in and out. It's really easy to just slip right in, especially if you're old crew who still has your crew identification on you.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, now that
And
you
people also wouldn't know if that person got fired unless everyone announced it,
yeah,
especially if you're just like a PA or something.
yeah, that explains a lot. Honestly, now that, like, I know all of that, that's kind of my theory now too.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, because nobody was, like, seriously hurt or anything, like, yes, getting stabbed in the face kinda sucks, but it was, like, a very minor injury.
The other thing, and it's really ironic actually that you mentioned this. So my next episode that we're recording it tonight. I was working on my research for it today. There are certain types of fish that you can't eat because they do induce like hallucinogenic states.
Pufferfish.
No, not even pufferfish.
Really?
Yeah, I was actually, spoiler alert for next episode. There are certain fish in the Nile River that you can't eat because, like, in, like, history, people wouldn't eat certain types of fish. There's, like, 3 different types.
Yeah.
Because if you eat them, they're basically just like drug fish. Like, they will cause, like marijuana similar symptoms of, like, hallucinations and, like, erratic behavior. Like, that's a thing.
Oh, I
So
thought
the moment that you mentioned a seafood platter, my initial thought was they ate one of these fish that was like a psychedelic fish.
yeah, like, oh, I didn't think that marijuana
Mhm.
was psychedelic, like, cause I thought
Not like, I don't know why they keep thinking marijuana is psychedelic because all these fucking people that smoke weed are like, "Oh my god, I can, like, see through my hand," and that's just, like, not the fucking case.
I feel like
It
they're microdosing shrooms while they
What's
smoke
Yeah, like shrooms or
marijuana.
something like that, or, like,
Yeah.
with the other drug that you were whatever.
PCP.
Yeah, it can induce symptoms very similar to PCP where you will feel like you're super fucking high.
Mhm.
That's a thing. So
Yeah,
that was my first thought when you said it. I was like, "Oh my god, they ate a toxic fish."
that's fair. Now, granted, given that my case was also kind of short, I also have Rotten Tomato
Oh my god,
reviews.
yes, please. I don't like the movie Titanic, by the way, just a heads up.
I do.
You do. I
Um,
love that for you.
so I have a few.
Mhm.
These are all the rotten ones from Rotten Tomato.
Okay, cool.
Eric Estrada from Cinegarage posted on March 29th, 2023. Technically very good with great visual achievements, but in the end, it's a cheesy, fluffy narration full of meringue that doesn't satisfy.
Well said. Well said.
Philip French from The Observer in the UK says James Cameron's deeply disappointing Titanic is a sad thing when set against the modest, factual 1958 film A Night to Remember, which bullshit, it's factual, because guess fucking what? The Titanic actually didn't go down in one piece like it does in A Night to Remember.
Oof.
And The Night to Remember isn't technically factual anyway. It's one of the...
I feel like naming a movie about the Titanic A Night to Remember is really fucked
No, it's
up.
based off of... Oh gosh, let me make sure I get the author's name right. Oh god.
Every night in my dreams, I see you. I feel
Okay, so allegedly,
you.
it's by Walter Lord, and
Okay.
he's an American author, copywriter, and popular historian.
Amazing.
He's best known for his 1955 account of the sinking of the RMS Titanic, A Night to Remember. So this book came
Okay.
out, and then the next year, a movie came out based off the book.
Homophobic.
But
R.I.P. to all the gay people there on the Titanic.
yeah, Lord interviewed
Just them.
63 survivors of the disaster, as well as drawing on books, memoirs, and articles they had written. So based on the time period of when it came out, it in and of itself cannot be factual.
Did they know that it had gone down in 2 pieces? I mean, didn't they have literal accounts saying it went down in 2 pieces?
Nope. They had literal accounts of them saying it went down in 2 pieces, but they also had accounts from crew members like Second Officer Lightoller who said it went down in 1 piece. So because like nobody could fucking agree until they found the Titanic itself and then saw that it was in 2 pieces. That's how it was confirmed that it was in 2 pieces, and that hadn't happened until the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So,
the 80s.
Oh wait, I lied. It wasn't 56. It was 58. So 3 years after the movie, 3 years after the book.
I don't think I'm using that word right.
Anyway. Yeah, and that was March 17th, 2022.
Crazy.
On the same exact day, Malcolm Johnson from the Hartford Courant says James Cameron's Titanic looks grand, but proceeds rather absurdly as it tells a tear-jerking but preposterous story of a love affair viciously fought by the most dastardly villain since the demise of gaslight melodrama.
You must be fun at parties, Malcolm.
He really must be. Oh my god, this is awful. Elvis Mitchell, Fort Worth Star Telegram.
Okay.
On March 17th, 2022. Why was everybody watching this movie on March 17th? Anyway. Oh, that's whenever it was re-released in theaters.
Yeah.
Okay. At least we know there won't be a sequel.
Oh! Look at my audio on the Zencaster.
I saw it.
Wow. You won't get a sequel either, Elvis.
Oof. Okay, so Tom Ryan from the Sunday Age says essentially James Cameron's Titanic is four loosely connected movies squeezed into one, none of them entirely satisfactory, none totally disastrous.
What are the 4 fucking movies?
That's what I want to know.
Oh, probably the love story, the Titanic story, the research story, and the villain story.
Probably.
Ew.
James Cameron's waterlogged epic is as vainglorious and as overinflated as the ship it's named for, according to Allison Gilmore from the Winnipeg Free Press.
Okay, Allison, chill the fuck out.
Alexander Walker from the London Evening Standard says, interpreting the tragedy as a tale of 2 people who find love a bit late in the day sounds fine in theory, but what about the many hundreds who simply found death? They remain computerized, flotsam and jetsam.
Okay, I'm actually with him on that one.
Yeah, that's fair. Forgive me for mispronouncing your name.
I forgive you.
Manola Dargis from the LA Weekly says Cameron excels at big scenes and muscular action. It's the little things, such as emotional nuance and complicated characters, that he cannot
what muscular action? Are you fucking... Did you watch the same movie we did?
No, because he also wrote he also directed the Terminator movies. He did a lot of like actiony movies before he did Titanic.
I didn't know that.
Titanic is actually like a
like a very different...
It's very different from his usual.
Huh.
Yeah. Tara Brady from Irish Times says, forget Celine Dion's Infernal Heart. This movie just goes on and on.
I'm with her on that one, though.
That's fair. David Walsh from World Socialist website says it might be best to perhaps describe Titanic as sort of the lowest common denominator. The film contains certain minimums necessary to draw in an audience, but its very blandness accounts for its great success.
Yeah, it doesn't really like to name a movie after Titanic. It doesn't really actually focus on the fucking Titanic. Like, if I went in and saw a detailed rendition of what the fuck happened, to be way more invested.
Yeah.
But I love the actress who plays Rose. She's absolutely gorgeous, and I adore her and everything that she does. And Leo's there. But
Leonardo DiCaprio is just there.
yeah. But I just don't care.
That's fair.
Like, the most interesting scenes of the movie are when the two main characters are not there.
Oof. Okay. So Felix Vasquez Jr. from Cinema Crazed says director James Cameron takes one of his most beloved historical incidents and transforms it into a McDonald's product.
Let him be autistic and have a hyperfixation. Have you ever loved something in your life? What's his name? Felix?
Felix.
Felix, have you ever loved something?
Okay.
Have you? Because I'm about to Titanic it.
Oof. Michelle Alexandra from Eclipse Magazine says 15 years ago, I didn't let Titanic into my heart, but now I get it. Movie is fantastic, but it utterly fails as a 3D reissue. Which is fair, because this is back in 2012 whenever they re-released it for the 100-year anniversary.
The
as
Titanic in 3D. Experience it like they did. The Titanic in 4D.
No!
It's like Rocky Horror, but it's only the water guns.
No! That's awful.
Bring a newspaper.
Stop it. Ed Whitfield from the Ooh Tray
Ooh.
says, forget women and children, we're about truth and realism first. Haven't you ever watched a movie? Ever?
Okay, here's the thing.
Ever?
I understand the criticism about it being a bad movie, but going to watch the Titanic and then getting mad that it's not a factual documentary on the Titanic is such a Chad move.
Oh my god.
That's like me watching Anastasia and being like, this isn't accurate. She wasn't beaten to death with a gun at the end of it at
Oh my god.
17 years old. It's true. If you really want me to sit here and fucking, like, why is Gregory Rasputin the villain of the Anastasia movie then?
I have no idea.
Make it make sense. You can't, because you didn't go to watch it for historical accuracy. You went to watch it for that one scene where all those ghosts bust out of the fucking wall.
Anyway, Beja Cummings, Little White Lies. If you fancy indulging in pure, unadulterated silliness and spending a night in the 90s, this is a good bet. Otherwise, David Edelstein. Now it can be told, from Slate.
Hello?
Excuse me. Now it can be told that the Titanic went down because of two distracting smoochers on the poop deck.
That's a really weird way to word that.
I mean, it's accurate. Desson Thompson, Washington Post. Titanic is a good, often stunning movie caught in a 3.5-hour drift.
3.5 hours?
That movie is very long. It's very visually pretty.
3.5 hours?
It's longer than the Titanic took to sink, I think. It is about the same length.
Oh my god.
Anyway, Stephen D.
That would have been a flex to make that movie as long as it took the Titanic to sink, just so you can look at your watch and be like, wow, this is taking forever.
Anyway, Stephen D. Gradanis from Decent Films. This is this man's name. Perhaps the most melancholy thing about Titanic is its celebration of romantic ideals to the exclusion of such self-denying virtues as honor, duty, and heroism.
Dude, join the military.
Jeff Andrew, maybe?
Jeff.
Geoff.
Geoff. It's Jeff.
Jeff. Oops.
Geoff.
Geoff. Anyway, Jeff Andrew from Time Out cost well over.
You were gonna say Top Gun.
No, Time Out. Cost well over $200 million. Disregarding the ethics of such expenditure on a film, this unprecedented extravagance has not resulted in a sophisticated or even very satisfying storytelling. Which
that's a lot of words.
Basically, it's saying regarding the fact that you spent $200 million on making a fucking movie of all things. Anyway,
it sucked.
It's really bad storytelling. And I'm like, I don't feel like it is. Maybe that's just me.
I think if the story and the historical event were not together, you could have just had it be a fictional ship that sank.
Yeah.
And it would have probably been more interesting.
I mean, I don't think it would have gotten the same draw had they not used Titanic, and that's fair.
Probably not, but I think the idea that, like, oh, the ship's gonna sink. You already know that Jack doesn't survive because there's no mention of him at the beginning of the movie.
Well, at the same time, I feel like it's one of those, like, maybe I'm just like a hopeless romantic at heart. Hi, I'm a Pisces Venus. Anyway,
I wouldn't date you if you're a Pisces.
no, I'm a Pisces Venus.
I know, but you hesitated before you said Venus, and I don't know why I got mad at you, knowing full well that you're an Aries.
Anyway, so I'm a Pisces Venus, and I love a little romanticness in my life,
I
and I
don't.
feel like, shut up. And I feel like this is just like kind of that good dash of like doomed romance from the very beginning. It's fine. Anyway, so Martin Scrubs from Low IQ Canadian says, let me finish.
That's
Let
an
me finish.
amazing name.
Abysmal.
I get it, because it went down into the ocean.
Anyway, Dragan Antulov
Ooh.
from rec.arts.movies.reviews says, Rose and Jack are burdened with simplistic characterization and atrocious dialogue.
They're basic.
Basically. Anyway, that's all my negative reviews for the Titanic.
Wow.
And my part of the case is now done.
I have to pee.
And I want candy. So be right back. Be right back. So what are you talking about today?
So Psychos loves the Titanic, by the way. Is obsessed
I
with the
do.
Titanic.
I really do. And I would do like a whole thing on like whole series on the Titanic if I could, but like we'd be here for hours and hours and hours, and there's not enough hours in the day to get everything done. I am obsessed with Titanic to an unhealthy degree.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't know what to do with this episode, which is my perpetual state of being. So if anyone has any requests,
Our email and socials are always in the description below.
yes,
so
you guys
please
can email us or follow us on Instagram. If you were listening, please follow us on Instagram. Give us some good reviews on Spotify and Apple Music. I don't know, whatever people in podcasts say. We aren't doing any advertising for these episodes. We are literally starting from scratch. So if you're listening to this, word of mouth is how we are getting people to listen. So please recommend us, rate us, all that fun stuff. Anyway, please. So I told Psychos, I was like, I don't know what to do. And they were like, oh, why don't you talk about Titanic conspiracy theories? And I was like, okay. So I started looking up some.
Yeah, Mythos is obsessed with conspiracy theories.
Not obsessed. I just think they're really fascinating.
Okay, not obsessed in the fact that they believe them.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
obsessed in the fact that there's so many and some of them are so interesting that you just like...
It's very fascinating to see where people's like brains go.
Yeah.
So they sent me a list and I was like, oh, I'll do like a couple of these. Nope. I did one. So today I am talking about the conspiracy that I have lovingly named the parent swap. It's the conspiracy theory that the RMS Titanic was swapped with the Olympic, her sister ship. I'm sure Psychos has heard this story before. I've also heard this theory before. I watched one documentary on this, and I'm just going to propose the information, and then Psychos is going to rant for 30 minutes. So just prepare yourself. So a little backstory on this. So in the like, I don't know if you guys know how like ships work. But typically ocean liners will have like fleets, and they'll have ships that are kind of like sister ships of each other. So the three ships that White Star Line, which is the company that made these ships, it's like Royal Caribbean kind of.
Mm-hmm.
They had three ships. They had the Titanic, they had the Olympic, and they had the Britannic. So these are the three sister ships.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Britannic was different plan-wise from the Titanic and the Olympic, but the Titanic and the Olympic were near identical. They were working off the same plans. So that's kind of where this theory comes from. So the Titanic and the Olympic were both built, and probably most of their ships were built by Belfast shipbuilders Harland and Wolff.
Mm-hmm.
They built pretty much exclusively built for White Star Line.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for fact checking me as we go.
Mm-hmm. I'm also munching on Peeps because 70% off sale.
Fair enough. So at this point in time, so in 1903, J.P. Morgan from J.P. Morgan and Chase, the Chase Bank, he purchased White Star Line. He owned it as of 1903. So when the Titanic set sail, he owned the company, right?
Mhm.
So at the time, ships going across the Atlantic.
Is that a question or is that a
So that's a question.
yes, the Atlantic?
Thank you. So at that point in time, ships that were typically going across the Atlantic from east to west were immigrant ships. There was a lot of movement from Europe to America one way.
Yep.
Thank you for fact checking me.
You're so welcome.
It happened so often, and so many low income people were on these ships that they were called coffin ships. Fun facts. There would be a
Okay.
lot of disease and death on these ships. They were called coffin ships. These immigrant ships were typically over-insured and over capacity.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where this idea comes from. Keep in mind, these ships over fucking insured. So we're going to talk about the Olympic real fast. So we already know that this theory goes into the Olympic getting swept to the Titanic. So I'm going to give you guys some history on the Olympic that'll make this situation make sense. Again, I'm also going off this documentary alone
Yeah. Also,
because I couldn't find anyone else being serious about it the way this guy was.
okay, to be fair, I don't know much about the Olympic. Again, referencing my take earlier on, my hyperfixation was not
It was on the Titanic.
on the Olympic. It was on the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Olympic fact checking, I can't do.
The Titanic set sail when?
April 10th, 1912.
Okay, so June 14th, 1911. The Olympic was on her maiden voyage. It was the first time that she went out. Maiden voyage means like first voyage.
Mm-hmm.
She set sail under Edward Smith. Now he was a captain for White Star Line typically, he was a captain for White Star Line. He sailed multiple of their ships beforehand. So he was kind of a seasoned captain with them. A week later, so a week after her maiden voyage, she got into a stern collision with a tugboat, Hellenbeck, in New York. So she, in New York, crashed. The stern is the front of the ship.
Stern is the back.
Stern is the back of the ship.
Bow is the front.
Oh, you're right.
Mhm.
So in New York, crashes with this tugboat. The tugboat nearly sank, supposedly did not sink. Yay. Nearly 3 months later is when she would get into the accident with the Hawk. Now this becomes a big situation. Before that, the Olympic had actually run over a sunken ship.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Run that one by me one more time.
So the Hawk was going along and had actually run over a uncharted shipwreck, and the bottom of the ship just got fucked the fuck up. So this is 2 accidents within 3 months of being together, right? Of being like a ship on the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 months after her maiden voyage, she gets into an accident with the Hawk. Now this is a big point, okay? So the Hawk is not a smaller ship, but so they're both pulling out of the same harbor. And the Olympic's going straight and the Hawk is on her left. And they're going at it. And the Olympic has this massive fucking engine, these massive fucking rudders.
Yeah.
It's such an intense suction that the Hawk actually gets sucked into the ship.
Oh, yeah,
And
that was like a big thing. I forgot about ship suction.
Mhm.
That's like huge.
Yeah, so the ship ends up colliding the front left of the Olympic ends up getting hit by the front of the Hawk. So they kind of almost T-bone each other, but it's more like the tip of a triangle kind of shape.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the Hawk has now been fucked up.
They fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, because the Hawk, I remember reading about this. The Hawk actually has like cement in its bow to like ram and sink other ships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I learned that, like, I thought that was really cool, but then I remembered that the HMS
That's
Hawk was
the
a
part that
warship.
Yeah, that's the part that hit the Olympic, which was a passenger ship. It wasn't built to withstand that level of damage.
Aggression.
Mm-hmm. So the Olympic is sent back to port. Now she returns back to the port that she was pulling out of, and then she's taken back to the shipyard to be repaired. So they did temporary repairs on her, but just enough to be able to get her to the shipyard to be able to get repaired.
Yeah.
The person who was sailing the Olympic was still Edward Smith. Now, this man, I keep bringing him up. He was the person who was steering. He was the person who was captaining the Titanic when she sank.
Yeah.
So
And he went down on the ship.
he did go down with the ship. So we'll bring him up later. So he's steering the ship. The insurance deemed that the Olympic was at fault for the accident. Even though technically speaking, the Olympic didn't do anything to cause the accident. I don't know if people know much about like water laws, but
Mhm.
typically, and this is my guess here, when you're sailing or when you're in certain areas where you have a lot of traffic with boats, you'll have these areas called no wake zones. And these are for smaller boats. I'm not talking about big boats, but you'll have these areas called small or no wake zones. And do you know what that means?
No. I know that you explained it to me a while ago whenever you were telling me like stories about where you grew up, but I don't
So
remember at all.
typically no wake zones you're going to find in areas where you either have protected sea life,
Mhm.
so like manatee crossing areas, or you're going to have no wake zones in residential areas on the water.
Oh, okay.
And what it means is, you ever seen a ship, or you ever seen a boat like really fucking zooming through the water and he's got these big ass ripples behind him?
Oh, yeah, the wake.
Those are wakes.
Okay.
So a no wake zone
Is basically you
mean
can't go that you can't.
you can't go fast enough to make your boat cause a wake.
Okay, that
Because
makes
that's
sense.
going to look different depending on what you're on. You could have jet skis in those areas, you can have small fishing boats, you can have larger fishing boats. You're not going to get anything super huge like a big sailing boat. But
Yeah.
no wake zones are basically these areas where you can't go super fast. And I'm wondering, since it sounds like the Olympic wasn't being pulled by a tugboat to leave the harbor, I'm wondering if it was kind of a no wake zone because the ship was so big that, because it wasn't that far off of the coast. I'm wondering if they were going fast enough that it caused that suction to happen, because if you're going fast enough to cause suction for another ship to get pulled into your boat,
I don't think
you
it
have to be
was
going fast.
I don't think it was speed. I think it was just how big it was because these ships were massive. The Olympic class ships were
Yes,
huge.
but if the engine is turning that fast that it's causing suction, because the suction is from the movement of the water under the ship into the engine, into the rudders. That's
Okay.
how water works.
I know that's how water works, but I just thought like the ship itself, because of how big it is, no matter if it's going fast or slow, how it moves because of that huge water displacement. Because that happened with the Titanic, with the water displacement actually caused so much pressure on another ship that I think it was called the America,
Mhm.
the rope to snap and for it to like almost hit the Titanic when it was setting sail, and it
No,
wasn't even that
no,
fast.
I know. That's what I'm saying though. Is so it probably wasn't going super fast, but it probably shouldn't have been pulling out the same time that the Hawk was pulling out.
Yeah, that's fair.
Is what I'm saying.
Okay, that makes
And they're
sense.
also, if you see a diagram of where they collided, they're not too far off the coast. They're in like a narrow, not a straight, but they're in kind of a tight area. And
Mm.
they're all like, both ships are on the right side of halfway through this thing.
Oh, okay, I
So
see.
they're not super apart. They're not trying to be apart.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
So, anyway, so the insurance deemed the Olympic at fault. So they weren't going to pay for the damages for the ship. This ship
Yikes.
had just been built like 3 months before. So, 3 months, it's already gotten into 3 accidents, right?
Yeah, that's not
It's
great.
not a good situation to be in. So,
That's not a great track record to have.
no, it wasn't.
You're like 3 for 3, and it's like, ooh.
Now, people who witnessed the accident and people who were on board both ships believed that the Olympics shouldn't have been held accountable for what happened, but the insurance found it enough that they weren't going to pay out for this. So, the
Eh,
Olympic now needed to be repaired. So, it was docked at the shipyard where the Titanic was being built.
I don't like insurance. Like, if like
Insurance sucks.
brief side tangent. Insurance sucks. Side tangent over. Going back. I don't have the emotional or mental capacity to rant about
Insurance.
insurance right now.
So, the Olympic gets docked at the same shipyard as the Titanic. And it's not like they're like sometime in the same area. Like if you've seen cruise ships dock, they're like maybe like a couple 100 feet away from each other.
Mhm.
Like they're not that far away. And it's because both ships were made by the same people. So the Olympic was deemed not seaworthy. It couldn't go out given the damages that it had. So they had to put a lot of work into fixing up the Olympic to make it seaworthy again. So they paused work on the Titanic to jump over to the Olympic and fix it. And it ended up really pushing back the timeline of the Titanic. Would you like to jump in now?
They, if I'm not mistaken, the Titanic was originally supposed to set sail in March. This original timeline for it would have put it. It would have been earlier in the year, but it wouldn't have, like, the icebergs tend to migrate. I learned that recently. It wouldn't have put it directly in the path of the ice field. It would have been safer for the Titanic to go during March, but because of this incident, it ended up getting pushed back to April, which is iceberg season.
Mhm.
Yay.
So the damages that the Olympic had is the steel frames on the ship were buckled inward. Rivets, so the big ass bolts that they used to put these things in, the
Mhm.
pressure had actually popped them out of the boat.
Mm.
The steel plating on 4 different decks were dislodged completely. And there was, it says distortion, but there was basically warping or bending to the starboard propeller. Starboard is right propeller, and don't you fucking dare say it.
I was gonna say correct.
Okay. And the crankshaft. I don't know what that means. I'm just saying it. Whatever the keel is
The
was
keel,
bent.
the keel is the bottom of the ship.
Okay, the keel was bent,
I,
and because of that, it gave the ship a list port.
yeah, the best way I can describe the keel is
It's literally the bottom of the boat.
it's like the bottom of the boat, and it can kind of come up the sides, but it's almost like that first layer.
So it sounds like it probably shifted the weight of the boat to the left a little bit to be
Okay.
able to give it a flip. Because the bottoms, I don't know if you've ever seen the bottom of a ship. They're fucking terrifying. They literally come to a point. You ever seen the
Yeah.
bottom of a fucking ship? They
Yeah.
come to a point, like fully. It's terrifying. So if it's butched and if it's hit in a little bit, then it's gonna shift a little bit because the center of gravity shifted.
Yeah.
So
It's I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad either.
keep that in mind. So they've got a lot of heavy repairs that are being done on the front left end of the ship, and the ship is listing like 10 degrees port. Now, list means tilted, so it's physically tilted 10 degrees to the left.
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't think is super noticeable, but it is pretty noticeable when you're on a boat. I've had a boat had a 10-foot sway, and it's not a fun situation to be in.
I think I'm good. I have never once been on a boat. I will never be on a boat.
I will be bringing in the very few times that I have been on cruise ships and sailing boats and deep sea fishing boats to this, which is ironic because I'm terrified of the ocean. But I have been on boats for a good amount of my life.
And I love you. You're never getting me on one of those. Like, point. I'm sorry. Like, if it comes down to it, and
you're like,
no,
nope, it's not happening.
if this is what ends the relationship, this is what ends the relationship. I'm sorry. I love
That's
you. I'm not getting on a ship
totally
or a
fine.
boat.
So
You
the
can. I'm not.
shipyard is in Southampton, right?
Yeah.
So the ship was being repaired there for over 2 weeks. October 1911, the ship was taken to Harland and Wolff's shipyard in Belfast.
Ireland.
On the way there, some of the repairs had failed.
Oof, that's not good.
Yeah. So the Olympic really was not seaworthy at all. Even the repairs that they had done, it was just not going very well.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine not, because isn't like around this time there were like strikes going on. People wanted actual basic human rights.
Yeah, I'm
and-
gonna get to it.
I'm sorry. I'll be quiet now. I'm sorry.
This is where the plan comes in. We've got a boat. You've got 2 boats, right? They're both identical boats. We have one boat, the Olympic, who is destroyed beyond repair. The insurance will not pay out to give us to be able to cover the repairs for this boat. We are losing money. This boat is not seaworthy. The Titanic is brand spanking new. It's still being built, but it's gorgeous. It's seaworthy. It's perfect. It's up to code of the time. And, we can't really do much with the Olympic. It's not making us any money. What if we just sank it? What if we just pretended that the Olympic was the Titanic and purposely sank it? People would think that the Titanic sank in some freak accident that we can't predict, that we have nothing to say this was our fault, and we'll sink it. We'll get the insurance money from the Olympic. That's basically just a big piece of junk in the ocean right now. And then we still have the shiny brand new Titanic, now the Olympic, that can sail and be perfectly seaworthy because we can use this money now. We have this money. We've made our money back from the Olympic. So really, it puts us in a better position. What if we just pretend to sink the Titanic, but actually sink the Olympic? Don't give me that fucking look, okay?
I don't like
Yeah, this is their master plan, basically. We're gonna sink the
it's
Olympic, pretend it was the Titanic. So we're gonna make the Titanic the Olympic. We're gonna swap the boats, and we're gonna sail the Titanic purposefully into an iceberg. We're gonna sink the Titanic, now the Olympic, or the Olympic, now the Titanic. We're gonna sink it, collect on the insurance money, and then have two perfectly functioning ships, the Titanic, now the Olympic, and the Britannic, and the money from that we had from the Olympic because we didn't get the insurance money from when it hit the Hawk, or the Hawk hit it. So this is where this conspiracy theory starts.
okay, this sounds really like I understand initially where
I'm
they're
gonna give you the information that proves this theory, and then we're gonna discuss the disproving of the theory.
okay.
Okay, so just
Okay.
fucking bear with me.
I don't okay.
I know.
Okay. I don't like it. I don't
So
like it.
at this point, all efforts had stopped on the Titanic to try and fix the Olympic, right? They
Mhm.
have to get the ship seaworthy to be able to pretend it's the Titanic and put it out, right? And then they can just swap the ships and say they're just fixing the Olympic in the shipyard. No one's going to notice. So it takes 7 weeks for them to fix up the Olympic. They replaced 1/3 of the side of the ship, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
cuz
Big ass fucking section of the ship, fucking replaced, steel plated, right? Another thing that happens. Drama, I know. Okay, so
how much trauma is there?
the starboard propellers, the back right propeller. So when they ran over that shipwreck, it fucked up the propeller, like super bad, right?
I mean, yeah, you would think so.
Yeah, you'd assume.
You would assume.
The starboard propeller, the back right propeller, needed to be replaced. Now, they already had, since they were in the same shipyard, they took the propeller from the Titanic and they fitted it onto the Olympic because they're sister ships. And since they're nearly identical, the parts are going to fit the same way. However, the propeller was stamped with the Titanic's like part number,
Yeah.
or like ship number, which was 401.
Yeah, cuz it was 400 and 401, I believe.
It was 401.
No, like
Oh yeah,
Olympic
400 or 401, yeah.
yeah, cuz I think Olympic was 400 and the Titanic was 401.
Yeah. So, they stamped it with the Titanic's like ship code, but it was put onto the Olympic because they needed it to be able to go out to sea. They had the propeller there, the part fit, they popped it on. March 2nd, they started working on, I said her again. I don't know which her I'm referring to, but they started, I think this is when they started working on the Olympics. They start working on the Olympic or the Titanic, one of the two, on the 2nd, and they work on her until the 7th. Now, at this time, both ships are docked next to each other, right?
Yeah.
So, here is the difference between the two ships because there are minute differences in them. So, one of the main differences is on the front of C deck. So, if you don't know what it means, the decks are numbered or lettered if you're on a ship, and it usually goes top to bottom. So, A deck would be the very top, and then F deck or whatever would be the very bottom of the boat.
Yeah.
So on other ships, you're going to have more numbers and letters. But if someone says, oh, I'll meet you on B deck, they mean the deck second from the top, or that's accessible second from the top. On the front of C deck is the very top. It's the top layer of the ship that before you're on top of the ship. So if you're standing on top of the ship, if you're standing on B deck, it's the deck right below that. So it's the top roofed deck all the way across the ship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the front of C deck, the Olympic had 14 portholes on the front of its deck. The Titanic only had 14. I say 16. I said 14. The Olympic had 16 portholes on the front of its ship.
Mhm.
The Titanic only had 14. Did I say that right?
I think yeah.
16 on the Olympic, 14 on the Titanic.
Yep.
The windows on the Titanic on B deck. So the deck, if you're standing on B deck, then the floor that you're standing on is the top of C deck. It's like the second story. So the next
Mhm.
story up from C deck, that deck, the windows leading onto the side of the ship, those were all evenly spaced out, and they're pretty wide windows. On the Olympic, you're giving me this dead look. I love it.
No, sorry. I'm trying to pay attention.
You're just looking at me like, This is some bullshit. On the
Well,
Olympic,
it's technically factual. Like all of
all of
like
this is true.
all of this is true.
It's just we'll get to it. We'll get to it. On the Olympic, the same windows on B deck were unevenly spaced and inconsistent widenesses. So you'd have one window that's like 3 feet wide, you'd have one that's 4 feet wide, one that's 2 feet wide, and they're like varying degrees of spaced away from each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing that I noticed that I didn't mention it on here, but it is something that is worth mentioning, is on B deck. The awning right there, that part of the deck is covered, I think, on the Titanic.
Yeah.
On the Olympic, it's an open air deck. So there's no ceiling on that part of the deck. So it's like the front half of B deck. There's no roof on it. There's, instead of on Titanic, there's like an awning over it.
Yeah.
That's one of the big differences that you can tell as well.
Yeah, it was a enclosed promenade deck.
Yes, a
On
promenade. Promenade means walk to walk. So a promenade deck is the walking deck. So going back to the Romanovs episode, the Standard, the girls would rollerblade around on the promenade, which is the topmost deck that you can pretty much walk the entire length of the ship on, is the
Mhm.
promenade. Because so they're trying to promote the Titanic, right?
Mhm.
And we don't have like computer softwares at this point to like make ship photos. So they're using photos of the Olympic to promote the Titanic because they're nearly identical. No one's going to know in the photos. But they're using photos of the interior of the Olympic, the whatever, to show off and promote the Titanic when it goes on its maiden voyage. They can't take photos of the dining rooms. The dining room's not done yet. They can't take photos of the promenade. The promenade's not done yet. They can't take photos of the staterooms if the staterooms haven't been finished and furnished yet. So they're using photos of the Olympic to promote the Titanic, which I did not know.
Mhm.
Another important thing to notice is that both ships had hardwood or linoleum flooring, which if you don't know what linoleum flooring is, if you live in a really shitty apartment, that like not marble, like
It's the
plastic,
kitchen floor.
yeah, it's that kitchen floor. It's
Yeah.
gross. It's
Which is
linoleum.
which is hilarious because it was super expensive back in the day, and like every
Now it's
time I
not.
go to the it was, but
I said now it's not.
oh, now it's not.
Yeah, now it's not.
I thought you said no, it wasn't. No, so I
I
literally thought
wasn't
you said no,
arguing
it's
with you
not.
on
And I
it.
was like, ah. But like every time I went to the Titanic Museum, because there's like a couple of locations,
Mm-hmm.
but the most popular one is in Pigeon Forge.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I go to the Titanic Museum, like the lady's just like, oh yeah, this is probably in your kitchen, and like stomps her feet on the floor, and I'm
Mhm.
like, like
Linoleum. I
like
have Titanic floors in my kitchen.
growing up, I was like legitimately like, I have Titanic floors in my kitchen.
You're such a nerd. I love you.
Hey.
So the both ships mostly had hardwood or linoleum. However, a week before the Titanic was set to sail, the designer of the ship ordered that all of that be covered with carpet. Not the external areas, obviously it stayed hardwood, but internal areas they ordered it to all be carpeted. Now, the theory behind this is if the ships were swapped, then at this point the Olympic has already gone on a couple voyages. So the floors are already probably worn down because linoleum gets dirty really fucking fast. And you can scrub the shit out of it all you want, it's not gonna change. You can polish hardwood to look new, but it's really hard to restore linoleum, and they probably didn't have a lot of time to do it. So the theory is that he covered all of the linoleum that looked worn down with carpet because it's easier to make carpet look new than it is linoleum. They wanted to hide the wear of people walking around on this ship.
Which is so dumb because we have like
We're not into the debunking area yet.
well,
Okay, go ahead.
which is so dumb because especially in the grand staircase area where most of the linoleum was, it was still linoleum. It wasn't
It isn't not all of it, but most of it. The areas that were the most worn down that they couldn't polish, they probably did that. Or areas that you would notice it more, areas that weren't typically heavily walked, probably. Now, the reason why I brought up the portholes, is because when the Titanic set sail, in photos of the Titanic leaving harbor for its maiden voyage, the people have counted the portholes. They say that there's not enough portholes, or there's too many portholes. It has the incorrect amount of portholes, and it says that the windows on B deck were similar to the ones that were on the Olympic. They were not spaced out properly like they should have been on the original Titanic.
Mm.
I'll get into that later. So, it's important to note that at the time, there was a coal strike going on. So, fuel was incredibly hard to come by, and there wasn't a lot of jobs for what they called firemen, which is not what we call firemen today. It's the men who would physically like shovel coal into the furnace, the engine.
Literally
Literally
firemen.
firemen.
Yeah.
It was really hard to come by jobs for these guys. They were literally in the middle of a coal strike. Like, it's impossible to get fuel to get these ships across the fucking ocean. So, the idea is if they were to swap, like, how do you swap these two ships and no one on staff say anything? Well, the argument is that since these two ships were nearly identical, once they were fully completed, which at this point the theory is that the Titanic is fully completed at this point when they've swapped the ships, right?
Mhm.
Staff wouldn't notice because all of the cutlery, everything that was stamped for the ships were stamped with White Star Line standard things. So the plates, the towels, the sheets, whatever. They're all stamped specifically for White Star Line so that they can be moved around as needed, because having plates and shit custom made for each ship is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, and
Mhm.
just White Star Line in general shit is pretty easy to come by.
Yeah. So it was super easy to just do that. Also, the plans are the exact same for the ships. So you swap the ships, the doors are still in the same place, the walkways are still in the same place. Assuming that the crew is not leaving their shit random places where it shouldn't be, it's really easy to swap the ships and really no one noticed because they're pretty much identical. Also, the other side of it is if someone did find out, jobs are super hard to come by again. You know, this is 1911. You
Mhm.
know, it's going to get a lot worse soon, and they're in the middle of a coal strike in Europe. So, it would be super easy to pay these guys off to not say anything, or for you to be like, well, if you say something about this, we can just fire you, and then you won't have a job and you'll be out and your family's going to suffer. So the idea is that if the crew did find out, they would metaphorically not want to rock the boat. They wouldn't say anything. I wrote that in my notes. I thought it was funny.
I was like,
Um,
"Did you actually write that
I
in?"
did. I wrote haha next to it. So the idea is they didn't want to cause problems. They didn't want to get fired. They didn't want to get blacklisted from working. These guys who are firemen. Now, it's
Yeah.
important to note that even though they were in the middle of a coal strike, the firemen that worked on the ship taking the Titanic, assumes now the Olympic,
Mhm.
taking the Titanic, quote unquote, from the shipyard to the harbor where it was going to sail off for its main voyage. Those firemen immediately quit after they sailed that ship and refused to get back on the Titanic at all. They literally said, "We'll sit here and wait for another ship to come by. We're not getting back on the Titanic." Which is weird because it's really like they can't find work, and ships
Yeah.
aren't really going across the Atlantic right now because it's really hard to find fuel to get these ships across. So you pretty much like this is your only thing you can do. All of them except for 2 went back on the Titanic. 20 men, only 2 of them went back on the Titanic. That was it. Isn't that crazy?
That is, and, like,
You're
obviously,
like, "I don't
like,
believe you."
I don't, but if something does like that did happen,
It would be weird, right?
it would be weird, but I imagine that it didn't actually happen, given that we know that this conspiracy theory
It's
is
been debunked.
it's been
But at
debunked.
this point, we don't know that yet, so we're just having fun.
Okay.
The other part of this theory that this documentary, this person who created this argues, is that the ship was being captained by Edward Smith. Now, at the time, Edward Smith had been sailing first White Star Line for a while. He also had notoriously the worst track record of any other captain at this time. He had caused accidents on 3 other White Star Line ships before he had even touched the Olympic. And they went to him and basically said, "We want you to sail the Titanic." And he was like, "Why?" And they were like, "We've treated you really well, but you've already damaged some of our ships. So how about you help us and we'll help you? We'll give you this job. We'll pay you to do it. It won't be on you at all. You're going to help us sink the Olympic, pretending to be the Titanic. We already have a plan in place. You just need to do what you do best and fuck up our ship on purpose this time, which shouldn't be that hard for someone who's chronically breaking ships, because he was also the person who was sailing the Olympic the 3 times it got into an accident, including the time he hit the Hawk, or the Hawk hit him. So they were like, you can do this, because that's literally like, if you want something to break, give it to someone who's clumsy. They'll drop it. It's inevitable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the argument here. So, another important thing to note, the Titanic, when it set sail, was only at half capacity, which is weird for its maiden voyage, because it's the first maiden voyage the ship's been on. It's got a lot of fucking hype, but it's only sailing at half capacity, which is weird because remember at the very beginning of this story, we talked about how even though it's a nice luxury ship, it's still an immigrant ship. It's still people going from Europe to America. They are over capacity, they are overinsured. They're not great situations to be in. And the ship is going at half capacity, which means it's losing the money of all of the passengers that it could have gotten on the ship already. And if White Star Line's really suffering for money, why wouldn't they just fill up the boat all the way? That's another weird things that happen. Going back to the coal thing, coal's super hard to come by. Having enough coal to get your engine from Europe to America is a lot of fucking coal. It is super hard to get enough fuel to get across the ocean. However, before the Olympic, pretending to be the Titanic, set sail, the Californian left on April 5th, which is a couple days before the Olympics or the Titanic set sail, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Californian left a passenger ship with no passengers on it at all, and more than enough fuel, actually too much fuel, to get it from Europe to America. Instead of sailing directly to America, it sailed out into the middle of the Atlantic and just stopped dead in the water and stayed there for a couple days, just sitting there in the middle of the fucking ocean, in the middle of an ice field. It had no passengers, nothing. It had a cargo of exclusively wool sweaters. That's it. Nothing else on this boat. And the staff, obviously. April 14th, the Californian at this point is stuck dead in the water. And the Titanic sinks when, Psychos?
April 4th, it hits the iceberg at 11:40 p.m. April 14th and sinks at 2:20 a.m. April 15th.
Okay, so the captain of the ship of the Californian that night on April 14th, he went to sleep fully clothed, shoes on, everything to the nines, in the chart room, not in his cabin. And he had the engines on standby in case they needed to be called into an emergency, which isn't normal, supposedly, at this time, to have the engines on standby instead of just letting them kind of rest. Like, he had them keep the engines going fully. At the last minute before the Titanic set sail, 20 first class members canceled their tickets, bailed, including JP Morgan, who was supposed to be on the Titanic, canceled his ticket and decided to dip the fuck out of there. He also had a couple brass statues that he really treasured taken off the ship an hour before it set sail. So some really precious cargo that he cared of, these statues, pulled him right off the ship. He pretended to be sick. 2 days later, he was discovered by the paparazzi, completely fine, hanging out with his family on vacation, as were most of the people who canceled their parties. They were found elsewhere celebrating, even though most of them pretended they had gotten sick. Also, another thing to note is that a lot of the first class cabins were not fully booked out. They could have done it, but they sold the first class tickets, or they sold the second class tickets to first class customers. Like, they didn't want first class to be fully taken up. So they had the estate rooms to give out. They didn't give them out, though. They were mostly empty. The moment that the Titanic takes off, there was a fire in coal bunker 10. Now, this fire had been going for a week at the time. It had been smoldering for about a week at the time. But instead of putting it out, they tossed more coal onto it. Like, they were trying to keep it going. And people theorized that this was plan B. If you can't get the ship to sink by hitting an iceberg, if the iceberg doesn't kill it, set it on fire. So they set this fire going in coal bunker 10, and they keep the fuel going on this because they dumped a shit ton of coal onto it to keep the fire burning just in case they need to sink the ship a different way. We are now at the night of the sinking. So that night, the Titanic got 3 messages. All of them were from the Californian, specifically giving the Titanic their location of where they were in the ice field. They got other messages about iceberg warnings in the area, but very important to know that they got these 3 messages. Now, because the Titanic was still a passenger ship, it was also getting a bunch of messages from people sending in information about like, "Oh, how's the dog? How's the ship? How's everything?" in and out. So the person who was the radio operator didn't catch the messages fully of where the Californian was because it was mixed in with everything else that was going on. Also, the radio operator on the Californian fell asleep before the Titanic could send out their SOS signal that they were expecting. Something that I actually learned that I didn't know before, it is considered normal practice at the time for when ships are going through an ice field to charge ahead full speed. Now, this sounds counterintuitive, but it actually makes a lot of sense because if there's something in the ice field that's large enough to actually damage the ship, if you're going full speed, it gives you enough momentum to turn early enough, and it's assumed that you would see it early enough to be able to turn the ship out of the way because icebergs don't move super fast, but ships can. So the idea is if it's a clear night, you can see the ship well enough in advance to be able to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
Or the iceberg well enough to avoid it. So that's what they were expected to do. And there were other ships in the ice field that also did that. So just a heads up. Now, Captain Smith on the Titanic, he also decided to go to sleep fully clothed in the chart room instead of in his cabin. Now, the chart room isn't too far. I don't know if it's too far if it's the same room as where they steer the ship. I actually don't know that information.
It's not.
For shits and giggles, let's just say, according to the documentary, the area where they actually go to like pilot the ship and the chart room are like maybe a 2-minute walk from each other, whereas his cabin would have been way farther in the ship. So I'm just going based off that information. Don't come for me, okay? We'll debunk it at the end. I don't believe all this information. I'm just giving it to you like I do.
I'm not thrilled by any of this. Like, I am. You're so amused by my not amused. By me not being amused by any of this.
The lookouts, right? The 2 gay guys in the crow's nest, right? If you don't know what a crow's nest is, if you've ever seen any pirate movie ever, it's that literally like that the bucket up on the stick.
Yeah.
On the mast of the ship.
Yeah.
That's called the crow's nest.
Yep.
That's where the crows hang out.
Sure is.
They look out ahead because they can get a better viewpoint. Are you done making fun of me?
Never.
You don't have those on modern ships.
You don't?
Sucks. No, you don't.
Oh, what the hell?
On some you do. Not cruise ships though. So that's where my knowledge ends. Okay, so
I feel like that's dumb. I feel like you should always have a crow's nest.
when the lookouts were questioned as to why they did not see the iceberg ahead of time, they got immediately defensive.
I mean, I would too, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's the problem. When the guy who was like the navigator for the ship, when he was asked to give them the location of where they were to the Californian, he misjudged it by 12 fucking miles. Now, here's the problem. They weren't the only ship out there at the time. There was another ship between the Californian and the Titanic. Do you know what the name of it is? Because I didn't write it down. It's the Samson. Haha. Okay, so here's the important thing to note. So there's 3 ships in this ice field, right? The Californian's on the left, the Samson is in the middle, and the Titanic is on the right. The Olympic, pretending to be the Titanic, is on the right. He just gave me the weirdest look. Now, because they misjudged their position by 12 miles, the Californian thinks that the Samson is the Titanic. The Titanic thinks that the Samson is the Californian. No one knows the Samson is out there somehow. Now, here's why they don't know the Samson is out there. The Samson was illegally seal fishing in the ice field.
Oh, that explains why this never came up in any of my research. I was like, what the fuck is this ship? I've never heard of this.
Was illegally out there doing illegal activities that they were not allowed to do. Now, the Samson becomes a huge problem regardless if you believe this conspiracy theory or not. The Samson actually really does hinder the fact that the Titanic did not get help when it was supposed to.
Yeah.
They did not come forward about what they were doing because they didn't want to get caught doing illegal things. So this might actually explain a lot more information as to what you know. So Midnight, the Titanic has hit the iceberg. Now, the thing with this is there's inaccuracies as to when they saw the iceberg. Some people say that they should have seen it 3 miles out. Some people say that they didn't see it till it was right on top of them. Either way, they hit the iceberg. Now, it is common knowledge that when you are hitting an iceberg, you should hit it head on. That will give you the best chance and the longest time before your ship sinks. However, Edward Smith didn't do that. He ordered the ship to be turned port to the left to try and avoid the iceberg. Now, the argument is, why did he do this? Because either you hit it head on, that gives you the best chance for survival, but the ship going at full speed would have more than enough turning radius to be able to fully avoid the iceberg if they wanted to, but they didn't want to. So they turned the ship as slowly as they could to port. Now, what that does is expose the right side of the ship, the side that doesn't have the reinforcement if it's the Olympic. Hitting an iceberg like this on the right side is going to cause the most damage. They purposely turned it in a way that didn't have the reinforcements. So it literally just gouges out the side of the Titanic or the Olympic. Fully just rips this thing to fucking shreds. If they had hit it head on, it would have probably saved the boat, but they didn't want to save the boat. They wanted to sink the boat. The Titanic hits at 11:40 p.m., right?
Mm-hmm.
Midnight, they start sending out the emergency flares. Now, standard on these ships were multiple different colors of emergency flares. You had white ones, red ones, and blue ones. Shocker, I know. Now, here's the problem. If you were to ask the Californian what was happening on the water that night, the Californian would say that they saw white flares going up, barely clearing the mast of the ships that they were seeing. So the Californian was waiting, if you believe this theory, that they were waiting for the Titanic to put up blue and red rockets. Those were the distress rockets they were looking for, but they were only getting white ones and they weren't going high enough to be the signal they were looking for. Now, if you ask the Titanic will say that they saw a ship on the horizon that was making no efforts to come in their direction, even though they were putting up flares that were way exceeding how high they needed to go in multiple different colors. Now, why is there a discrepancy? The Samson was using white flares that were not going high enough because they were trying to recall the rowboats that they had sent out to capture the seals they were hunting. The Californian is seeing the Samson's lights calling in their rowboats, and they're not seeing the Titanic's distress lights because the Titanic has misjudged their distance from the Californian by 12 miles, and the Samson is right where the Titanic was supposed to be. That's why the Californian never made it out there. They weren't getting the distress signals. The radio guy had fallen asleep, and the visual thing that they were waiting for, they weren't getting, even though the captain of the Californian asked 3 times, what color are the rockets? And he was told they're white. So he said that can't be the Titanic then. So they never saw the distress signals from the Titanic. They were supposed to go pick up all of the people that were out there. They had more than enough room to take in all of those people. But because they were seeing the Samson instead, they didn't get out there soon enough to be able to get all the people on. It took them way too long to get these lifeboats out, and they were only putting the lifeboats out at half capacity. Now, why would they do this? They thought the Samson was the Californian. They thought that what was going to happen was these lifeboats were going to be transport boats back and forth between the Californian and the Titanic to basically ferry people off of the ship. Now, Edward Smith was waiting for the Californian to arrive for help, and it wasn't coming. After an hour, he finally realized the ship was not going to arrive. That's when he started sending out the distress signal. That's when he started loading up the lifeboats at full capacity. But at this point, most of the lifeboats had already gone out. That's why most of the people didn't make it off. On top of the fact that the lifeboats that they had in the Titanic, there were not enough to hold all of the passengers on the ship, which was code at the time. So it was normal, but it caused some fucking issues. If you're going to believe Second Officer Lightoller, he said the Titanic started turning port before the lookouts even came down from the crow's nest. But he couldn't have known this at the time because he was still in his cabin. He hadn't even woken up yet. He also argued that there was absolutely no mist on the water, but the guys in the crow's nest said that there was mist, and that's how they didn't see the Titanic. Or the Titanic. They didn't see the ship they were on. That's how they didn't see the iceberg, because it was foggy on the water. But the second officer said there was no mist at all. And again, how could he know this if he was in his cabin at the time? He also lied and said that there was no ice warnings coming in at all, and they were never made aware of the fact that they were sailing into an ice field or that there were a large amount of icebergs in the area. He also claims that he got off the Titanic and stayed in the water for half an hour to an hour and then climbed onto a capsized boat. However, the water at the time was between 2 to 3 degrees below freezing. You would die within 4 minutes of sitting in that water. There's no way he sat there for an hour to an hour and a half and then climbed on top of a capsized boat. I could not get a clear answer on if he crawled on the capsized Titanic or if he crawled on a capsized lifeboat.
It was a capsized lifeboat. The Titanic
Had gone under at this point.
completely gone under.
Now, 5:30 in the morning, the Californian radio operator finally wakes up and they start heading to the site because they're finally getting in the messages from the night before. But at this point, the Carpathia, a different ship that was out there that night, had already arrived and started picking up the survivors. I don't know who this guy is. J. Bruce Ismay. Who is he?
He is a very important member of the White Star Line.
Now, when he was picked up by the Carpathia, he was taken to the doctor's cabin and immediately sedated.
Yeah, because he was a fucking nervous wreck.
He sent 3 telegrams to White Star in New York to hold the crew from the Titanic, not let them into New York, but immediately send them back to Southampton. Immediately. A lot of sea captains were called in during the questioning of what happened that night, and they gave the opinion that there is no way they did not see this iceberg, that they would have seen it 5 miles out, which would have been more than enough time to turn the ship enough to avoid it, or to plan to hit it head on or slow down or something, but they didn't. Now, at this point, a week after the Titanic has taken off and sunk, White Star Line cashes in the insurance money, which they doubled before the Titanic took off. A week before the Titanic took off, they doubled the insurance. Not even 5 days after the ship had sunk, they cashed in on the money. They got their insurance money for the Titanic sinking. Here's the final piece of evidence that I have for you guys. When they found the wreckage of the Titanic and they went down there, they noticed that the paint had chipped away off of the Titanic. Now, underneath this chipped paint was a gray undercoat, which is weird because a gray undercoat was not used on the Titanic. However, it was used on the Olympic. They used a gray undercoat before they painted the entire ship. They didn't do that on the Titanic. So why would it have a gray undercoat if it was never painted that way? The other piece of evidence is that when they examined the wreck, they found that the keel of the ship had been reinforced and it had other repairs done to it that were consistent with the ones done to the Olympic that wouldn't need to be done unless the ship had gotten to an accident before, which is impossible because it was the maiden voyage for the Titanic. The other argument is that when they went down there, standard was that the ships would have their names engraved into the metal of the ship. They'd be about 4 feet tall. They would then paint into the engraving of the letters the ship's name. However, the Titanic did not have that. It had giant metal letters bolted into the ship instead, which is not standard for White Star Line at the time. But when they went down there, they discovered that 2 of the letters of the Titanic's name on the ship had fallen off in the wreck or over time of being down there. And in its place, engraved under these bolted on letters, was the letters M and P for Olympic. That is all I have for you. Now, let's get into why this is not true.
Featuring
Before Psychos has a fucking heart attack. Now, I'm going to work from the bottom up.
Okay, thank God.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. I try to sit so patiently during all of this. I was like, I tried. I really, really did.
There
I'm
were no
struggling.
bolted letters on the Titanic at all. The Titanic has the nameplate Titanic on the ship.
Mhm.
That is not true at all. The keel was reinforced. However, so was the Britannics. When they saw the accidents that happened to the Olympic, they reinforced the weak points that happened on the Olympic, on the Titanic, and the Britannic to make it stronger because they learned from their mistakes of what happened with the Olympic.
Yeah, it was a double keel. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't like a single keel like a lot of ships were at the time. They reinforced it with a double keel.
Also, every single ship got a gray undercoat. And if it didn't get a gray undercoat, then gray is just the color of the metal that they used underneath the ship. It would be weird to have 3 identical ships in the same fleet and use an undercoat for one ship but not the other 2, considering they
Yeah.
were made at the same time and the undercoat wouldn't change anything about how the ships sailed.
Mhm.
That's one thing. The other thing is that Edward Smith did not have a terrible track record,
No,
or else he wouldn't have sailed the fucking Titanic in the first
he
place.
was actually a very brilliant captain. Like everybody adored him. Like he was like a superstar in White Star Line. And I mean, this was his final journey. This was his last trip before retirement. The idea that you would send this superstar out to sink this ship on his retirement journey feels so just disrespectful
Mhm.
to who he was as a person.
Mhm. Now, I'm gonna talk about being able to see the iceberg last, because I have a lot of opinions on that. Because I literally talked to Psychos for like 40 minutes about it on the way home one day. So
We're not
we're gonna
talking for 40 minutes
we're gonna
about
ignore
it
that, but
now.
I have a lot of opinions about that. So we're just
Yeah.
gonna skip over that. We're gonna come back to it later. Now, the other thing, all these ships were over insured. That was practice at the time. It
Yeah.
would be weird if they didn't collect on the insurance for the ship, considering they had insurance for a fucking reason. They also probably had to pay damages for anyone who was on the ship at the time, which
Damages.
means you would have
Oh.
to take the insurance money to be able to do that in the first
Yeah,
place.
the damages that people sought for this was insane.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you're gonna talk about it, but like the reason why it was so underbooked. So with ships like that, the more people that are on the ship, the heavier the ship is. The heavier a ship is, the more coal you need to run the ship.
Mhm.
They purposely undersold the Titanic because of the coal strike.
Mhm.
They weren't trying to like completely book it out. They were trying to get like some eyes on it because oh hey, but because of the coal strike, they weren't trying to like
And White Star
max
Line
it out.
can't money their way into getting more coal. If there's no
Exactly.
coal, there's no coal. You can't make more coal for this one ship. Now,
Exactly.
here's the other thing. The lookouts didn't come down before the ship started turning port, and the guy who was supposedly in his cabin wasn't in his cabin. He was on deck when he made this observation, and there wasn't any mist on the water, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, it was like a fucking clear
Mhm.
night that night. It
Now
was too clear.
The Samson was out there that night, and they were doing illegal seal activity. That I do think was a huge reason why there was a mix up in the ships. Ships mistook people for other people. The Titanic could see the Samson could see the Californian, but they didn't know the Samson was out there. The Samson was not radioing anyone, and they weren't answering any SOS calls because they didn't want to be asked why they were out there if a ship did go down. Now, the other thing, and this is Psychos' favorite thing to mention, the Californian didn't fall asleep on accident. They pissed off the radio operator on the Californian, the Titanic did, and the Californian said, "Okay, I'll go fuck myself then," and turned the radio off.
Like essentially, cuz whenever you have the way that the wireless worked is like you have headphones and you're like also translating the different
Because it comes in through Morse code.
it comes in through Morse code, but you're also translating the different radio waves into like words and stuff. But if you're trying to send something out and something's coming in, it causes like a jam and
Because it's on the
it's
same radio
yeah, and
frequency.
it's a very loud noise. And this was like the third or fourth like there had been several ice warnings that had come in throughout the day.
And they did get the ice warnings. They
Yeah.
did get an influx of radio messages at one point because they had shut off, they had tech issues, and then they got an influx of passenger messages. They did get the ice warnings at the
Yeah,
time.
they get the ice warnings.
They knew, like, this
Like
isn't an uncharted ice field. They knew they were sailing into an ice field.
yeah. And some of them were some of them were delivered, one of them was not, as far as I know. But the Titanic itself, like the radio thing had gone down like the previous day or like earlier that morning and they had just gotten it back up. So they were
By
backlogged
like a day.
by so much. And then so whenever they're trying to send these messages out, they're getting this message in and it's like this really loud ringing in the ear. So Jack Phillips, I think it was Jack Phillips, he radios back to the Californian like shut up, I'm busy.
Literally.
And because the Californian wasn't required to have its radio thing on all night. The dude, and it was just one operator. He was like, "Fine, guess I'll go fuck myself. Good night, peace out."
Now, here's another good point. Why was the Californian sitting in the middle of an ice field just hanging out? This was also common practice. If you're in the middle of an ice field, instead of charging right through it, you just kill the engines a little bit, not a lot, because getting the engine started back up is going to cost way more fuel
It's
than
such a
just letting
pain
it
in the
go.
ass. Yeah.
They were waiting out the ice field. They were basically going to sail in the morning, is what was happening. They stopped in the ice field that night. They were planning on sailing back later that day. The influx of coal honestly could have just been them shipping coal over to New York, shipping coal over to America. If there's a coal strike and they have an influx of coal, it could have also just been cargo that was being stored with the rest of the fuel.
Yeah.
If they're bringing over wool sweaters, they don't have a heavy cargo, they're not going to burn through as much fuel,
And
which
at
is
that
probably why they had the fuel to spare to be able to sit in the ice field until it passed later on.
Yeah, and the Californian wasn't a passenger like liner at this
Yeah,
time.
you mentioned it was a cargo ship at this point. They were using it as a cargo ship probably because passengers weren't really going over, and if they were going over, they were going over on White Star Line.
Or Cunard.
Yeah, whoever that is.
It's an the rival shipping. Like the Lusitania and the Mauretania were launched just before the Olympic class ships, and that's who they were competing with.
Mhm.
So rival shipping company.
Now, this is just a theory of mine. If the captain was sleeping fully clothed in the chart room instead of in his cabin, in my opinion, if you're in an ice field with other ships, they were probably all on standby just in case. If it wasn't common practice to just sleep in the chart room if you just fucking felt like it.
Yeah, like
Also, the chart room isn't anywhere near the head of the ship, and also his cabin was probably right next to it as well. So, it would be weird if the captain was sleeping down in the same area with the passengers. That wouldn't make any sense. The captain is usually pretty fucking close to the head of the ship.
yeah.
I don't know what that room's called. So, there was a fire on the Titanic.
Mhm.
That I have no explanation for.
The fire was put out.
It was one of their columns, right? On the top of the ship?
No.
No.
It
What was
was
burning?
it was one of the bunkers.
Okay. I'll
Like
pretend.
one of the coal bunkers had caught fire. And it was like deep in the bowels of the ship, so it wasn't really a
It was like in the
problem.
bottom middle of the ship.
Yeah. So it wasn't really a problem. I mean, yeah, a fire on board is going to be a fucking problem, but because they had gotten it under control and it was like now smoldering, they felt that it was safe enough to, I almost said drive with it, but like
Sail with it.
sail with it.
It didn't cause any problems to the actual trip itself, and they probably got it under control within that day or so. If
Yeah,
they
they
didn't
got
just
it.
dump water on it.
Yeah, they
There's
got
so
it
much
under
water.
control and they were just like, okay, this is as close enough as we're going to get it under control. We're already under a tight deadline as is because this voyage has already been pushed back once. We don't need it pushed back again and again.
Now, why did the Titanic have a list? It didn't. It was one dude who was on board who said it had a list. There's rumors that everyone else said it had a list. You wouldn't notice. I lied. You'll notice if it has a sway, but a list of 10 degrees, if you haven't sailed on a ship before, which if these guys are immigrating over to the US, they probably haven't been on a ship that often, you're gonna feel wobbly when you first get on a ship, especially when it's sailing. Getting your sea legs is 100% true. I've met people who have never been on a ship before who get on and they can't walk straight. They're wobbly. They feel nauseous. Like being seasick is genuinely a serious thing. You constantly feel off balance. If you're one of those people who, like me, gets really nervous and feels like when you're standing on the top of a really tall building, the floor is slanting towards the railing,
Ugh.
it's that feeling 100% if you've never been on a ship before. These people probably hadn't been on a ship this big or sailing this speed. You'll feel it until you get used to it.
Yeah.
It didn't have a list. It was never listing. That wasn't a thing. The Olympic had a list, but only one dude documented it had a list, and he was a scientist, not a naval person. He wasn't a boat person. He wasn't an ocean person. He was like some random fucking like a chemist or something.
Mhm.
So keep your chemistry out of my boat. Why did they have different portholes? They didn't. I've looked at both photos. They both have the same amount of the portholes are correct. I don't know what to tell you. They're correct. Also, the photos that are being sent out of the Titanic aren't the Titanic, they're the Olympic from the promotional photos. Also, they doctored photos back then too. It's not that hard to draw in white lines, and it's weird that the windows will be unevenly spaced but also different sizes. That doesn't make any sense. Also, in the documentary I watched, he said that he was holding a replica of the Olympic. He wasn't. He was holding a replica of the Titanic. The B deck was covered on the replica. He was lying about it to make you think that he was referencing the Olympic when he was actually showing you the Titanic. So when you looked at photos of the Titanic setting sail that he was arguing was the Olympic, it would look weird. So there's that argument. Also, the ships were only docked together for like less than a month or so.
Yeah, it wasn't that long. It really wasn't.
And it's impossible to swap these ships without someone noticing. On top of the fact that, like, people are all like, oh, well, so they can't take photos of it. You can't get that many people to keep their mouths shut because the idea of letting the news know that they swapped the ships would give you more money than they probably got getting the insurance from the Titanic sinking in the first fucking place. Also,
Probably.
the crew would know immediately because these ships,
Mhm.
while quote unquote identical, were not identical. They made changes to the ship. You even mentioned that the guy who designed the ship was actively writing in changes to the Titanic while it was sailing. They
He
were
really
making changes
was.
all the time. They would notice, the crew would notice if one day they walked in and all of this construction they had done had been changed. Also, the Titanic wasn't done while the Olympic was in the middle of getting repaired, and the Olympic had these massive steel plate reinforcements on the side of the ship above water. They would have noticed that on the Titanic.
Yeah. The Thomas Andrews, I the more I learn about this man, the more I fall in love with him because he's a he had a brilliant mind. But literally, like, we have testimony from some of the stewardesses and some of the other people who are on the Titanic of him literally day of the sinking is like running around trying to fix things, trying to like not like before, like this was before the ship hit the iceberg, but it was like running around making changes, making comments like, "Oh, this probably should change. Oh, we should probably change this for the gigantic," because the Britannic the Britannic was originally going to be called the Gigantic,
Me.
but then the Titanic sank and they were
That's
all,
my nickname.
no, and then the Titanic sank and everybody went, "Ooh,
Gigantic
no."
probably is not the word for it. Yeah, they were making changes to these things constantly because the thing is about, like, the Titanic didn't get a test run voyage.
Mm-mm.
The maiden voyage is the test run voyage. You're gonna change shit as you go. Now,
Like the only voyage before the one from the UK to America was from
the
Belfast
shipyard to the
to
harbor.
Southampton.
Mhm.
Yeah, from Belfast to Southampton, and that was an overnight thing. And Thomas Andrews was still running around trying to get shit done on that one
Yeah,
too.
they were changing shit all the time.
They were still doing stuff morning of
Yeah.
it setting sail. Like
Uh-huh.
up until people were boarding, they were still painting things. They were still fixing things.
I don't think people understand how big ships are and how you can literally still be doing shit when people are boarding. The ship isn't ready when people are boarding. The ship's ready when it gets out of the fucking harbor. Now, there's one more thing I'm going to mention. I'm going to let Psychos rant and then I'm going to rant because I have really strong opinions about this as someone who's been on the water a lot. So, why did 20 people pull out last minute? Because they fucking could. They were wealthy ass people who decided last minute, I actually don't feel like going to America. And they just didn't go. It's also the same amount of people that pulled out of the Olympics maiden voyage as well. It's very common for a large amount of people to back out last minute from cruise ships, from passenger ships, from trips like that. That's very fucking normal. They probably just didn't fucking feel like it. It was a one-way ticket to America. They probably didn't want to deal with the trip all the way there and all the way back. In the middle of a coal strike, they probably couldn't even guarantee that they were going to make it back anyway. And if they were just going to America for a fun little holiday in the middle of a coal strike, it doesn't feel worth it. And honestly, after what happened with the Olympic, which keep in mind was only a year before the Titanic set sail, they were probably like, well, this ship is bad luck. This fleet is bad luck. I don't want to go on it. So they probably just backed out and just decided they didn't want to go and then pretended to be sick because they didn't want to say, I actually don't want to go on your ship. And then just went on vacation anyway. It was very common at the time. It's still common now. People who have not a lot of money can't fathom that someone can spend that much money on a ticket and then back out of it last second. But it happens all the time. I don't think people understand how rich people work. They can just fucking do that. They can decide that they can do that. That's a thing. So, as I've mentioned before, I have been on many a ships. I have been on a lot of ships in a lot of places on international waters, overseas. I've been on deep sea fishing vessels. I've been on small little rinky dink boats so you can fit like 6 people and you got to really hold on for dear life and you like ride the wakes of bigger ships and you like are out and you can't see the fucking coast. Okay. I've been on the water. I don't think people understand, especially people who make theories like this, how big the ocean is. I really don't think you understand. I also don't think people understand how dark it gets when you're on the water. It was a new moon that night. There was no moon in the sky. Now, I know that it's hard to think like, oh, when there's no moon in the sky, we can still see stuff because you have lights. There's this thing called light pollution. And what that means is that the lights that are closer and brighter to you are going to hinder you seeing anything farther outside of that. That's why you can't see the stars very well in the city, but you can see them really well in the Australian outback because of light pollution. On a ship, you don't have light pollution. That's not a thing. Even if you have a ship 12 miles away that you can barely see on the horizon, it is pitch black. If you were to black out the ship's lights, you can't see your hand in front of your face. You do not know pitch black darkness until you have been on a ship in the middle of fucking nowhere, like I've been. And even when I was on a ship on a full fucking moon, it was still so dark that the moon lit up right where it was. But if you were to turn fully away from the moon, you can't see the ocean. And this is on a modern cruise ship. If you're on an older ship, you have maybe some lookout lights, but nothing super bright. We've got these big ass, massive ass balls of sun on our ships now. They didn't have those back then. This is the 1920s. 1920s. 1912, right? They don't have LEDs. They have these little incandescent things that'll kill you if you get too close to them. That's it. You do
This is
not
like the early 19 teens. Like this is like
Yeah.
1912.
You do not understand how dark it is on the ocean until you are on the ocean in the dark. It is terrifying. If there is no moon, nothing, you're lucky if you can see the waves breaking on the bottom of the ship. You're lucky. Even if you were to shine a really bright fucking flashlight, the light's not going that far. I don't think people understand that when you're out in the middle of nowhere, light does not go that far.
Mhm.
Light is impressive in space, but on Earth, it doesn't work that way. The idea that they could have seen the iceberg, to me, no, they couldn't have seen the iceberg. And in the movie The Titanic, they show the iceberg as a void against the stars. You wouldn't have seen the stars. You've got a shit ton of light pollution on a passenger ship that's lit the fuck up. Even at 1 o'clock in the morning, these ships are lit the fuck up. It's dark in your cabins. Those lights stay on all the time.
Mhm.
If you walk out of your ship at 1 o'clock in the morning to go down to the 24-hour pizza buffet and brownie bar, there's lights and probably people still out there. Also,
That
there's
sounds really specific.
don't at me. Also, there's bars, there's clubs, there's casinos on deck. There's things going on. You can go out at 2 o'clock in the morning and walk into a comedy club. You can walk into a play that's still going on. You can walk into an 18 plus bar that's still blasting music. You can walk into the casino that's open that late because you're on international waters and it's fucking legal, I guess. I can't imagine it's that different on there. They had these big open areas where you could go hang out. The light, even I don't even think they turn the lights off in the dining room when people leave that night. Because even though you have dining room hours, you like the lights are still on. They still have to clean and shit like that. The ship is still lit the fuck up. So you're not going to see the stars because you got light pollution. So even the idea that the iceberg was a void in the stars, no, the iceberg was invisible. It was 100% invisible. On top of the fact that when I went out onto the open water in the full moon, I could see the water rippling, the waves rippling because we weren't on calm waters, we weren't on rough waters, but we were on waves. The
Mhm.
Titanic sunk into a completely still ocean. There were no fucking waves in that ocean. Completely calm. If it's completely calm, you've got no fucking light. You're not going to see the water breaking on the iceberg. You're not going to see this. And icebergs, sorry to break it to you, they don't glow. I know people like to think that icebergs are these big balls of ice that light up. Ice doesn't glow. It refracts light that hits it, but they don't make their own light. So if you don't have anything hitting it, you can't see an iceberg.
Mhm.
So the idea that these lookouts, who didn't have binoculars that night, by the way,
Nope, they did not, because
saw an
somebody
iceberg
fucking lost the fucking key.
from 3 miles away in completely still waters with zero light at all, no light at all. If you had a high beam light for the 1920s pointing directly out of that ship, you're not seeing that iceberg until it is on top of you. And when that thing hit, like, you can't avoid it. So they're lucky that they saw it in enough time to turn. And when they turned, by the way, Edward Smith wasn't the one who made the call to turn it. They
Oh.
turned thinking they could avoid the iceberg.
Mhm.
It is super easy to misgauge how far away something is on completely still waters with no visibility. And it is super easy to assume that you can make a turn that you can't make. It is so easy, especially if you're going at full speed, which they probably were at that night because that was standard for what was going on at the time. They also didn't want to turn the ship too fast because I don't know if you guys ever been on a boat that turns too fast, but they've got a big ass ship with a lot of cargo in it. And if that cargo is not secured properly and those people aren't secured properly and you turn that ship too fast, everyone's falling over. That's what happened with the Sewell Ferry accident. All the cargo shifted to one side because they turned too fast and it capsized the boat. They were turning as slowly as they thought they needed to avoid the iceberg, but they didn't turn fast enough. They didn't
Mhm.
realize how far the iceberg was, and they didn't want to turn aggressively to the point that it would knock over everything, because how embarrassing is it to turn to miss an iceberg and end up knocking all of your first class passengers who paid a shit ton of money to be there out of their beds, because it will happen if you turn a ship too fast.
Especially if the Astors were on board. The Astors were the most wealthy family in the world. You put as well as the
They bang their
Guggenheims.
head, you're fucked.
If something goes even slightly wrong during this voyage for them, you're shit out of luck. You're done. You're
And White
done.
Star Line can't afford that kind of lawsuit because they're already at a loss on the Olympic that is literally not seaworthy. There was also a point that I didn't mention, that when they were putting the ships through their tests to see if they were seaworthy, they argued that the Olympic was put through almost minimal testing, but or the Olympic was put through really rigorous testing, but the Titanic was put through like no testing at all. They were arguing that they did that on purpose because they knew the Olympic couldn't pass those tests, because at this point the ships were already swapped. That's not the case. The Titanic didn't need to go through that intensive of drills because it was perfect. It had just been made. The Olympic also didn't have to go through that intensive training or drills when it was first made. But the Olympic had just gotten into 3 accidents. They had to make sure that in any case, the Olympic was able to handle what happened to it. Also, the Olympic kept going for, like, years
Yeah,
after
the
the
Olympic
Titanic sank.
Yeah, the Olympic actually started being used in military service, and then it was eventually scrapped. The Also, fun fact, the Britannic was also used as a hospital ship, but unfortunately, it struck a mine near the Greek
Me too.
coast and it sank. But
So, in my personal opinion, as someone who has been on the water a lot, it is super easy to misgauge how far you are from something. If you are on the ocean in complete darkness, no moon, you are not seeing anything. Nothing. You do not understand true darkness until you are on a ship with no lights and no moon, because that is your only light source at all. You do not understand complete darkness. If you've ever been on a cruise ship, you'll know you can't see the whole galaxy when you're on the boat because of light pollution. If you have no moon, you can't see jack shit. It is you and the void. That's it.
and sometimes the void sends an iceberg to sink your shit.
The sky doesn't glow. The sky is the lack of visible atmosphere between you and the universe. And if your light is brighter than the universe's, you're never going to see it. You're not going to see shit. That's very poetic. You should write that down. You're never going to see it. They're lucky that they didn't hit anything bigger or another ship. But thankfully, a ship would have been lit the fuck up.
Yeah.
In my personal opinion, the Titanic probably shouldn't have tried to turn. That is my main thing. Also, the Samson really fucked over what was going on at the time. The Californian probably should have been able to go help, but the Titanic operators had to be a little bitch. It was human error. That is it. This boat sank by human error. There were not enough lifeboats. They waited too long. They tried to turn when they shouldn't have. That is what caused the Titanic to sink. The last thing I will say, the argument that when they went to go look at the Titanic, the starboard rudder or whatever was 401 coded, right? That was the whole thing. The Olympic had the 401 on it. It's just the Titanic's fucking code number for its own propeller that's on it that they probably were able to make to be able to stick onto it. Do you know what else had the same code? The fucking engine. Every other piece of equipment that was on that boat was coded for the Titanic. The other pieces of equipment that were on the Olympic were coded for the Olympic. You can't argue that because the ship had its own code on it that it was a different ship. That doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It had the right codes on it because that was the equipment that was used on it. Because it's probably easier to just put a propeller on the Olympic and then make a new one for the Titanic instead of waiting for one to be made specifically for the Olympic when you have a perfectly good one sitting right there to get the Olympic out of the harbor faster than the Titanic. Because they finished working on the Olympic before they set the Titanic out to sail. They needed to get it shipworthy as soon as possible because the Olympic had shit to do. I don't believe this theory at all. I think it's ridiculous. I think that it is trying to make an enemy out of human error. I don't think White Star Line purposely sent the Titanic. I think it would have been a really bad idea to do that because you have a ship that has had multiple accidents and then you have a ship that sinks. No one would step foot on a White Star Line vessel again. We're seeing it today. So many so many Boeing planes have been grounded for tech issues that no one wants to fly on Boeing anymore. It's the same thing. If it came out that the Oasis of the Seas and the whatever of the sea, I went on
Symphony of the Seas?
Symphony of the Seas. I went on the Oasis. If the Oasis of the Seas hit, an iceberg and sank, and then the Symphony of the Seas hit a fucking thing, if you ask me to go on anything of the sea, I'm like, you're fucking joking. I'm not going on anything Royal Caribbean puts out. You ever heard someone talk good about Carnival cruises? No, it's true.
I mean, yeah, that's fair,
It's
but,
a
like, I'm still
stain on
laughing.
White Star Line that this happened. And no
Yeah.
one's going to want to sail on the Olympic and the Britannic now that this has happened, which is probably why they went into military service. They had nothing else to do with these fucking
No,
boats.
they, so the Olympic was a passenger ship for a while, but the Britannic, came into service right as World War I was breaking out, because you have to
You
remember
imagine.
because you also have to remember that the Titanic sank in 1912. Just 2 years later, World War II broke out.
Yeah, too, you're right.
2 years later.
Yeah.
So it's not that they
And we know how that went.
so it's not that you had these ships that nobody wanted to sail on. It's that a fucking war happened and it was dangerous to sail.
I
Like,
imagine there is probably a truth to the fact that no one would, like, if you asked me, hey, 2 of the 3 ships that White Star Line has put out this fleet have had issues. Do you want to sail in the Britannic? I'd be like, no, absolutely fucking not. And look, I hate the idea that so we were watching a Stephanie Sue video,
mhm.
and she mentioned in the video that there's this thing that people do. I feel like we were watching a video about the Titanic. We were watching a video about something because I remember her mentioning messages that weren't coming in because they were getting an influx of messages. Was it a
Mhm.
different ship or was she talking about the Titanic?
She was talking about the Titanic.
She mentioned in her video that there's a rule that people who do like extreme sports go by or extreme hobbies go by, and it's like the 3 strikes you're out kind of rule. In my personal opinion, the 3 strikes were the 3 accidents the Olympic got into. At that point, they never should have set the Titanic out because it kept getting pushed back because of the Olympic. The Olympic was Titanic's 3 strikes. That ship never should have sailed because had the Olympic not had its issues, the Titanic would have sent out properly. It wouldn't have been there at that time.
Mhm.
Also, yeah. So that is my opinion on this. I've heard of this theory. I believed it for a little bit. I was like, oh, the drama.
Yeah,
But when
you
you look at the facts, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. It hurts more people than it helps. And it assumes the fact that the White Star Line purposefully put that many people on a ship knowing that they could have died because there is no way they could have 100% guaranteed that everyone would have been fine because they, first of all, they're assuming that, first of all, not even considering that, Had the Titanic hit the iceberg head on, all of the crew for the engine would have died because their cabins were in that front part of the ship where the Titanic would have hit. They would have killed the entirety of the fireman staff.
I don't think that that's necessarily the case.
It is.
There's a lot of evidence that suggests that if they hit head on, it would have survived long enough to make it to New York. It would have been heavily like crippled, but like with assistance they could have made it
No,
there.
if you look at a map of the Titanic,
I know
their cabins are in the front of there. They
I
would
kn-
have had at least a shit ton of crew injured and some dead.
there would have been injuries and some did, but I don't think it would have been enough to knock out the entire crew. I think I understand where you're coming from because you've seen the maps and you've seen the things,
Mhm.
but you also have to remember that you're still not necessarily new to this,
Mhm.
but this is a hyperfixation I've had since I was 7 years old. I
Okay.
am much older than that. No. Um,
I hope so.
yeah. but the bow was also doubly reinforced. It wouldn't have like crumbled in as much to
Oh, had it not been reinforced, it probably would have though.
had it not been reinforced, you would have been 100% correct. But it was
Ah.
reinforced.
Uh-huh.
That's why you're not
That makes sense.
yeah, you're not wrong, just with other ships, not the Titanic.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
probably because that came from the opinion of the other captains that had sailed other ships.
Yeah. And let's be
That
honest,
makes sense. They probably didn't know that the Titanic was reinforced there. That probably wasn't common knowledge.
it wasn't common knowledge, but at the same time, these other captains also have their own motives for speaking about
And
this.
they're not sailing ships as big as the Titanic, because
No,
wasn't it the biggest at the time?
Titanic was massive. That was the largest ship in the world
If
at the
you've ever
time.
gone from driving a car to a pickup truck, you'll understand that you just can't treat them the same.
You really can't. But you also have these captains who also have something to gain by making the people of at like the making the people
At White Star Line look bad because then those people are going to come over to their ships because they're like, well,
exactly
look, I wouldn't do this.
like literally the Star Witness of like one of the captains
Mhm.
was a captain for Cunard,
Mhm.
their direct competitor.
Mhm.
You have that's why with certain things, like especially with true crime, you have to make sure you're looking at everybody's motivations.
Which I'm not a true crime person. I just gave you a wild theory and then disproved it.
You're going based off of information that was presented to you, but you didn't have the background to
Look,
understand
I
why it
think
was
given
wrong.
the fact that I didn't do a lot of research into why these were wrong, I used very good critical thinking skills.
You
Because
did
I didn't
awesome.
do any research into why this was wrong. I just knew it was wrong.
Yeah.
Also, there's one guy in the comments of the YouTube video that I watched who was fighting tooth and nail to tell people how stupid they were. And I appreciate him very much.
Honestly, that was my spirit animal. That was me. That was me. That was me.
You from 7 years ago.
Yeah. That was, that was me from when I was 7 years old.
You motherfuckers don't know anything. Your parents are just like, go to bed, psychos.
Like, why are you still awake?
Where did you learn to say motherfucker?
I learned it by watching you, Dad.
YouTube hasn't been made yet.
No, well, it was. It was in its early days, but yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, very important thing to note about this. I am all in for people having their fun little whatevers. You know, I
Mhm.
don't care. Do what makes you happy as long as it's not hurting other people. However, this theory inherently hurts people.
Mhm.
It's the idea that people are so evil and conniving that they're willing to do this. And I personally don't believe people are that evil. I do believe that there are people out, like evil people out there who probably would be like, oh, that's a smart idea. I should do that. But I don't think that was the case here. Everything that I've seen and for like the years and years I've been on this planet hyperfixating on this, um, it's
50 years I've been on this planet, hyperfixating about the Titanic.
it it feels so disrespectful not only to the people who survived and were telling their stories and understand that these people they all had a reason to try to make themselves look good because they don't want to be responsible for being the reason why the Titanic sank. These are all people who were desperate to try to keep their livelihood.
Put it to you this way. Going off the piggyback of the Romanovs episode, because it's all I have to gauge. This is like shit-talking Nicholas to Alexei.
Yeah.
Because the children of the people who were young on the Titanic could possibly be alive, or at least their grandkids could be alive.
Yeah,
People who survived the Titanic, they're like people who knew them personally are still alive.
yeah, some of them are, some of them aren't. The last survivor died, gosh, I think back in 2012, 2011.
So that person's grandkids are probably still here.
Yeah,
They
but
could listen to this.
yeah, they
People
could.
whose grandparents tucked them in at night and loved them and cherished them and were recently buried, those grandkids are still alive.
Yeah,
You're talking about their grandparents being pawns in this big insurance scam.
yeah, it's not good. And then on top of that, you have the people, the family members of those who died on the Titanic. Let's be clear here. Unfortunately, a good majority of the people who survived were the rich and wealthy. For instance, with the Titan submersible, we made jokes all the time about the Titanic claiming more rich people, but a majority of the first class passengers survived.
A lot of the lower class citizens didn't make it off the ship.
Third class passengers, a good majority of them did not survive.
They didn't even make it off the ship.
No.
Like, they probably were part of the initial people that were killed because the ship started taking on water.
Yeah.
They probably got flooded.
Mhm. And they weren't allowed up. They physically were not allowed up. And it's heartbreaking. And then you also have this God, I'm going back to this one because we didn't talk about it and it pissed me off. The fact that this dude's like, "Oh, you can only survive for X amount of minutes during this time." Okay, you have adrenaline keeping your body alive. You have adrenaline keeping your heart pumping. Not to mention, a lot of these people survived for like an hour in the water. Like you have the people in like the lifeboats talking about how over the course of an hour after the Titanic sank, they could still hear the screams, but they were slowly dying out over the course of an hour.
Also, the argument that the water was 2 degrees below freezing was in Celsius. For my
Yeah.
Fahrenheit girlies, it's 28 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it was freezing.
Which,
Yeah.
if you've ever been to the Titanic Museum and stuck your hand in the water, I can leave my hand in there for a really long time. Because I can't feel it.
I was like waiting for it.
I got nerve issues.
But like at the same time, like it's incredibly disrespectful to the survivors who were in the water to begin with, like who were pulled out. Like that collapsible, Officer Lightoller was on a collapsible for like a while before he got rescued, and it was like swamped, and he helped save a bunch of people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Officer Murdoch, who was the one at the helm whenever the like iceberg right ahead came in, and he was doing his damnedest to try to make. He was stressed beyond belief, but he was trying to basically go around the iceberg. Like
Yeah.
he was doing
That's
his
why they
best.
turned the ship.
Yeah.
It was probably because they really thought they could make it.
Mhm.
And the whole argument of why did they turn it port?
They initially went hard to starboard,
Mm-hmm.
and then they once they gauged that they didn't think it would hit, they went hard to port so that way the rest of the ship would follow around it.
If you've ever, again, seen the Costa Concordia video, they were trying to swing around the iceberg, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem is because they didn't realize what they were getting into with either how close or how big the iceberg was, instead of swinging the ship, they just left the most vulnerable part of the ship. Going hard to starboard really fucked them up. If they had probably just stayed to port, it would have been fine. But also, it's not like a car. Turning a ship is really, really hard and it takes a long time. If they had just immediately gone to port, they probably could have avoided the iceberg. But also, you have to consider there's other icebergs in the field. So they have to also make sure they're not overcorrecting and hitting something else.
Yes, so they know that there's this iceberg, but they have no idea if there's another iceberg just around the corner.
And
They have no idea.
they can't see. It's dark. There could be another iceberg immediately to their left and they just end up hitting that one instead. They could literally be surrounded. They don't know. They're going based off the information that they have.
Yeah. So
They probably knew it was clear to starboard.
yeah. This conspiracy theory is disrespectful on multiple different levels, and I I'm gonna be 1,000% honest. Anytime you talked about it and, like, anytime you brought it up, back whenever you were, like, still kinda believed it, I was like,
I mostly did it to tease you. I really
yeah.
didn't think they swapped it because that would be we'd know by now.
Yeah, we
With
would
how
know.
much we've been down there, Magellan just did a full scan of the ship. We'd know.
We would know. I just don't appreciate the fact that this theory is
Still a thing.
still exists and is still so prevalent. I mean,
Okay,
granted, if you don't know anything about the Titanic and you hear all of this information presented to you the way it has been,
which is why I presented it the way that I did.
mhm.
I wanted to present it in a way where it sounded like it was true to make you believe, but it's not. I'm also going to mention real fast. There is a theory that the Titanic was cursed because there was some mummy
And that's just blatantly wrong.
on the ship.
There wasn't one.
There was no mummy on the
There was
ship.
no mummy on the ship. That was just
On
blatantly
top of that,
wrong.
it wouldn't make sense for there to because the mummy was quote like supposedly nicknamed the ship sinker. That wouldn't make sense, like just Egyptology wise, to name a mummy the ship sinker. That's just like not a thing. Also, that's not how a name is translated in Egyptian. Also, bold of you to assume that the mummy would have survived that long, given how many rich British people were on the boat.
Right.
Anyway, sorry to our listeners in England, but if you're our listeners in Ireland, we love you very much. But yeah, there was no mummy on the ship. It wasn't cursed. It was just human error. It was a really big tragedy. Unfortunately, it was a necessary evil, which I hate using that phrase, but it did bring ships up to better standards
Yeah,
because there were genuinely not enough lifeboats. And now, I don't know if you've ever, again, I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise ship, but I have. And the first thing you do when you get on a ship is you go to your muster stations, which means you like that's the first thing they used to have it as optional as long as you did it at some point. They make the whole boat do it now at the same time. They get you out to your muster stations. They tell you where to go, all that stuff, and then you can go out and do whatever you want. But they do that pretty much the moment you leave port if you don't do it right away. Like if the moment you pull out of the port, the moment you pull out of harbor, if they haven't done it by the time that you pull out of harbor, they're going to do it that day. You can't go to bed without going to your muster station. They require it. They make you sign in.
Mm.
Like it's mandatory now. And they do have enough lifeboats. They tell you how to get the lifeboats. They tell you where your like life jackets are. They show you what to do. They'll have people do examples of how to pull up and down the lifeboats. Like it's very secure. If you go on a ship that has its shit together, a ship with its shit together, you will have a a safety call where you go to your muster. I forgot what it's called. You'll go to your muster stations. It's a requirement now. So at least it is in rural Caribbean. Anyway,
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of how things.
so I don't never get you on a cruise ship.
You will never get me on a cruise ship. I love you to death. You will never get me on a cruise ship.
Shout out Oasis of the Seas, Royal Caribbean, if you want to sponsor us.
No. Anyway, no, it's just unfortunately this was just one giant accident caused by human error, and accidents like these are unfortunately what gets eyes on the safety measures. I mean, you have, like, for instance, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. That was a tragic loss of life because they locked the doors.
The crash doors.
They
That was
locked.
the implementation of crash doors.
Yeah.
If you don't know what crash doors is, if you're ever inside of a building and you see two sets of double doors where the push buttons are on the inside to get out, those are crash doors. So
Yeah.
you crash into them, they push out instead of being pulled in.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that was implemented. I mean, seatbelts were implemented because of the high death toll. Like, there are reasons behind every major safety regulation now.
Unfortunately, people will not make safety protocols until
Until
someone dies or
and
gets really hurt
or not even
and
that.
costs them money.
Like, these things only happen because of there has to be multiple instances of people getting hurt and multiple instances of people dying. It does not stop with just one. Which is why you need to put pressure on people to really, like, hey, you should do these things. Staring directly at you, Boeing. Anyway, so I believe that is all for this episode.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, tell us on Instagram, follow us, like, subscribe, Give us a good review, please. You'll make me so happy. Especially on Apple Podcasts, which I guess is
Yeah.
something that's important for us to get reviews on.
Yeah, Apple Podcasts
Um,
apparently really boosts us in the algorithm, and because we're doing this from the bottom up, like, we don't even have, like, a core.
we're not even telling like our friends really about this. Like our family and close friends know, but it's no more than 20 people. So if you're listening to this and you don't know who we are personally, please tell your friends to listen, let them know. If you're someone who listened to the first episode and then jumped onto this episode, I'm so sorry because that does happen sometimes because we can see.
We see.
We see you, but
But, yeah, it's one of those.
please follow us on Instagram.
Please. We're trying. It's
We'll
like
shout you out.
I mean, I usually don't like.
We also mentioned really early on that we had a Patreon. We do not have that right
No,
now. We are
not
not
right now.
making money off of this. We don't have the time, patience, or energy to deal with Patreon right now, so we don't have one. We are genuinely just currently doing this for fun. We are paying basically to do this podcast right
Yeah,
now.
I know
So
the
we're not
Patreon
making
exists, but we haven't done anything
yeah,
with it.
we're not
That's
making money on this.
no.
So whatever you guys can do to help us right now with letting people know, hey, there's this podcast. They literally just started, but Mythos is pretty funny. So
And Psychos gets a little mean sometimes. It's
but
fine.
it's okay. And if you have any requests for things that you want to hear, please let us know. I know I said that I am not doing ghost stories, but if you request a ghost story or something crazy, I don't really do cryptids, but I can try. Let me know. I'd love to talk about it, or historical things that you want to get more eyes on, or if you are part of an indigenous or marginalized community and you really want to hear your story told, send us in an email. Be like, hey, these are some of the things that we have that not a lot of people talk about. This is something that I'd love to hear you guys talk about, this legend, this story, whatever. Because unfortunately, if it's not a super popular story already, it's not going to make it to my desk because it's
Yeah.
hard to find information for a lot of things, unfortunately. And
And
I love to learn more.
yeah, and same goes for any like true crime cases you want me to cover. Like I have like a list, yeah, but like I'm always open for requests. I'm trying to branch out to other parts of the world. Like I'm sure there's some out there that's just are never going to show up on my feed because they're not like one of like the 5 same ones over and over again. And I know I'm going to be repeating a lot of the same popular ones, but for now that's just what I want to like do as long as they're from like different countries and until I get the proper resources to do more of the unknown cases. Cuz as of right now I don't have access to those resources and that kind of sucks about like the whole thing with this. You really only have the resources to do the popular stuff until you get popular enough to do the unpopular things.
Yeah, we unfortunately, because I mean, this is one of 3 jobs that we have, and this is something we love, and we'd love to do this full time, but because this is, unfortunately not the thing that we can do all the time, we can't pour as much information. You know that we're willing to sit here and talk for hours on information. If it's important, we'll mention it, kind of a thing. We did that we literally just did that with Romanovs. So if you want us to really deep dive into stuff, we'll do it, but we need people to listen to be able to get that momentum going, because the whole point of telling stories is for people to hear them. And we see you. We do see you. I pull up the analytics every single day to see you guys, and we get more people on. And I still haven't figured out if it's because you guys are actually all over the world or if you're using VPNs. I know where your VPN is set to, which is weird places to have your VPN set to. But I pull up the analytics every single day. I check the Instagram every single day. We check the email at least once every 2 days. So if
Yeah.
you have things you want to hear, let us know. If you are listening from other countries that is not the United States, please let us know. I'd love to hear from you.
We would love to hear from you guys, especially because right now everybody's so like it's so small.
It's so small.
It's
There's
so
so
small.
few of us. We can remember you. Be like, hey, you've been listening since day fucking 1.
Oh my gosh,
Oh my
guys.
gosh. Anyways, so we are going to wrap this up because we have a whole other episode to record after this, which is going to be next week's episode. So any final words?
Stay safe. Again, I'm gonna double back to what I mentioned a while ago. I don't remember what episode it was, but don't always believe everything you read initially.
Mhm.
Look at everything with a critical eye. Like and
Including our stuff. If we make
yeah,
mistakes, please tell us because I would rather get information right than be right.
yeah. I would rather like if one of us messes something up, please let us know immediately. We can always add in a corrections
Mhm.
thing. That is some like we are not here to be the end all be all of certain cases.
And I'm more than willing to put out an episode bonus on top of everything else and be like, "Hey, this is stuff that we missed." Because I think it's important to make sure the information is correct.
Hmm. I agree. That being said, stay safe, guys. Keep learning. Think critically. Don't believe everything you see for the first time. But
There are petaled plants growing in the southernmost part of the planet.
have a good night.
Fuck Rasputin.